Salutations, ghouls and freaks. Welcome to this podcast of Stormers, insane slashers, undead blood drinkers, and all around crooked beans, convening to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Mage of Madness, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone. We had to rearrange the schedule because Brainstormer had stuff.
Yeah. And I am your host slash scarecrow impersonator, the Brainstorm of Pop Culture. So yeah, this will be um, our final Halloween uh podcast.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason why we don't have really an intro for anything is just because of time's sake. Not
Mhm.
saying that, to be fair, I do want to get up early tomorrow just because I got stuff to do, not work, mind you, or so.
Mhm.
But yeah, um, also
But
just because
Brainstormer actually did his homework over the week, and so we can finally talk about Agatha.
you're never gonna let that go, are you? That I procrastinated, are you?
No, I'm not.
You know me. You know how hard it is for me to focus on shit.
But you also had a whole frickin' month.
To be fair, I did tell you several times that I was waiting for the whole season to get out so I could binge it.
And you had an entire week, and you still
No,
didn't.
I had because last one came on Halloween, right, which was a Wednesday.
Day before Halloween.
Okay, so that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I had 4 days. Shut up. All right, I watched it. Okay, I watched it. So
Uh-huh.
okay, let me hold on. I have a thing for people to look at besides our faces.
Mhm. I already kind of did a week-by-week review with Anglantine over at Isle of Comics, so I'm gonna let Brainstormer sort of take the lead on the review because while I also have my opinions on the show that I didn't really have time to talk about with E because E is a showman, um, I will. The reason we delayed it a week was so that Brainstormer could catch up. So now that he has caught up, I'm going to let him take the floor.
Right, and just for the record, this is a fan made poster. The link to it is in the description. If anyone's curious. Um, Overall, I do think it's good. I could see issues that have been brought up. Uh, like this is our kind of non-spoiler uh, part of the review.
Hmm.
It's generally well made. Like it looks a lot better than a lot of stuff I've seen from like Disney, Marvel, Disney.
Hmm.
Um, Music, and I'm not just talking about The Witch's Road. Obviously, is actually really good. Um, and for a Halloween thing, it's I think I might be paraphrasing you, Don. So feel free to correct me if I it is genuine. It more than likely can be a genuine like Halloween classic. But what else can I say before we get really like spoilery? Actually, yeah, all the characters are genuinely compelling, and there wasn't a bad performance from anyone. And overall, it was just a really fun little magical romp. Like that's kind of my like general sense of it. Someone using a nail gun?
Probably.
Renovations?
My mom's redoing the flooring again.
Ah, Okay. Anything to add, Dalton, before we get like spoilery or?
I mean, like I said, I kind of wanted to let you kind of take the floor on this.
Isn't the whole reason I have you on this show because I'm not much of a talker?
I mean, yes, but I I wanted to I wanted to at least give you a chance before
Yeah, that's fair.
before I overdo it, probably.
Yeah. Okay. I guess kind of going spoilery. I will definitely say like it was episode 7, right?
Episode 7 was Lily's time slipping divination episode. Yes.
Yeah. That was actually kind of one of my favorite ones. Just because like it was really creative, and I think it kind of proved the smartness of the writers from like the earlier episodes of showing the randomness of Lilia having more sense and context with that episode. But
Mhm.
also it was just genuinely a lot it just was a lot more creative, I think, in like the presentation compared to like some of the other episodes. Um yeah, I feel like again, I'm looking at it from more of like an actual like filmmaking and writing and story episode. I feel like Dawn's obviously going to look more into like whether or not it was actually more correct in showing magic.
Mhm.
I'm not wrong.
Probably not. No. Go on.
Um, I also like how they kept Agatha kind of a bitchy witch. I guess best way I can say it. Like she wasn't. She had her moments of sympathy and
They didn't try to take out the world's smallest violin and begin to play the Doofenshmirtz backstory bullshit.
yeah,
They didn't do with her what Wicked does with the Wicked Witch of the West, or what Angelina Jolie's Maleficent movie tried in vain to do for Maleficent.
yeah, like it's again, you can understand her and she does have a sympathetic backstory, but you never really are on
They
her side.
also they also didn't really go into too much of the other direction and try to make her irredeemable
No,
either,
no, no.
which was nice.
Yeah.
Because even when she had the Darkhold and presumably was being influenced by the Darkhold in WandaVision, she still wasn't a bad person exactly. Like she came to Westview in WandaVision because she sensed the afterglow of thousands of spells all being casted simultaneously and went, what the fuck? How is this possible? There might be a practitioner here who knows more than I do, so I'm going to ask her for pointers. And when it became shown that Wanda knew nothing, essentially, she was an idiot savant of magic, Agatha essentially went, she is far more dangerous than she realizes. It's better for everyone if I take hold of this power because otherwise the world is doomed. And as we saw in Multiverse of Madness, she wasn't very far wrong. Um, I I came to this realization about halfway through Agatha all along. If you actually look back at WandaVision in the actual context it has and not what the writers wanted the audience takeaway to be, is Agatha basically just wants power, it seems, for the sake of having it. Like, we don't, as far as we know, she has no overarching evil plan, quote unquote.
No grand ambitions.
She's not out to take over the universe or the multiverse or anything. She just wants power for the sake of having it, and according to her, in WandaVision, she takes power from those she defines as undeserving. Which again, if we're looking at it in context of what actually happened in WandaVision rather than what the writers wanted us to take away from it with the stupid "they'll never know what you sacrificed for them" bullshit, um, Wanda most definitely was undeserving because she was basically a child playing with loaded nuclear missiles.
Right.
And Agatha did her best to be
Hey.
nice about it right up until the moment when she realized that Wanda was an idiot savant who didn't know even the fundamentals of the basics of witchcraft. And
Don't
only then did she switch over to the I want this
don't
power for myself thing. Sorry.
no, you good. I also do want to say like the side characters, like the other witches and Teen, which we'll get into later,
Yes.
are actually really well written. I would say they don't. They're not over. They're not boring. None of them are boring. None of them are annoying. And funnily enough, I would say I might be stupid because often don't see SJW stuff until it's pointed out. They don't come across as SJW characters.
No, I agree with you there. They're like the Maulers and the Garys and the
Oh, those guys are like fucking so bitter these days.
yeah, the critical drinkers and the EFAPers and so on wanted this to be Marvel's answer to the Acolyte. And they like it. See, I watched several of their videos when Agatha came out. They really desperately wanted to make comparisons between Agatha and something like the Acolyte or something like She-Hulk. And there is no basis for that comparison. None whatsoever. There's no spiting the audience. It got close in episode 6, which is why episode 6 is, in my opinion, the weakest of the episodes. They would have been smarter to leave well enough alone with regards to a certain character who shows up in episode 6 and shall forever live in infamy until they fix him. But point being, even the weakest episode of Agatha All Along, which is episode 6, or episode 9, depending, I guess, on how you look at it. But even the worst episode of Agatha is better than the best written and directed and acted episode of Velma, The Acolyte, or She-Hulk or Rings of Power.
Right.
There really was no even allusion to SJW bullshit, with the possible comedic exception of the fact that Lilia Calderu, the divination witch, gets offended by Hollywood witch stereotypes.
I feel like you get that though.
I kind of understood that aspect, but the crucial part is that there was no feminism, there was no intersectionality, there was no spiting the viewership, etc. Again, with the possible exception of a certain boner included in episode 6, who shall forever live in infamy until they either kill him off or reveal that he was an evil mastermind the whole time and canonize some of the fan theories. But by and large, and I guess this is where I get into my views on Agatha All Along as a whole.
I'll be right back.
I was worried, along with everybody else, when they announced Agatha All Along, especially because some of the behind-the-scenes interviews and so on didn't fill me with hope. That changed, however, when at, I want to say it was D23, it may have been Comic-Con, they performed part of the Ballad of the Witch's Road for D23 or Comic-Con. Again, I don't remember which. Ever since I first heard the second and third lyrics of that song, because for some reason they didn't perform the first part at D23 or Comic-Con, I realized that someone somewhere was doing their homework, either Marvel-wise or IRL practice-wise, and so there was genuine effort being put into making this a cool Halloween show, which is fundamentally what Agatha was and was trying to be. And I don't know what the Garys, Nerdrotics, and other assorted EFAPers were smoking. I saw some people utterly disingenuously say that the Ballad of the Witch's Road was somehow as bad as The Power of Many from The Acolyte. And I'm sorry, but if you believe that, you are high. As in, you are not compos mentis. There is no conceivable parallel between those two things. One of these things was witchiness done correctly, and Agatha was most definitely it. The Acolyte is the most disgusting, pandering bullshit I've ever seen relating to any sort of witchiness ever. Agatha did the groundwork, did the legwork, did the homework. And as such, from both a Marvel mystical standpoint, which of course is my area of expertise, and from an IRL practitioner standpoint, I've been an occultist for 18 years. Agatha was one of the best researched and the best written shows about magic, period, that I have seen in years. It really, really resonated with me. And it actually kind of directed my attention towards the sort of Greek Goetic or chthonic attributes, the sort of folkloric crossroads magic aspect. Hecate, the Baron, the Fates, the Norns, etc. It kind of got me into that aspect of magic, which I've been slowly but surely inching my way up to anyway, but it sort of put a fire under my ass and made me want to do research on that aspect of magic. And so, from that perspective at least, it really resonated with me. And the fact there were no major, like, SJWism, again, the only thing that even barely approached it was the occasional joke of Lilia Calderu being offended from a witchy perspective. But they never once tried to conflate, like, the intersectional feminist definition of womanhood with witchcraft. Witchcraft was being a surrogate or a stand-in for itself and nothing else, pretty much. And I really appreciate that as well. Forget the rest of what I was going to say. But point being, not only is this show an excellent show, not only will it likely become a Halloween classic, one, I expect it will inspire quite a few people to get into magic in the first place, which was always good. And for another, it might be the best Marvel TV show, full fucking stop. The only thing that Marvel TV and I'm not counting the Netflix shows, by the way. I'm not counting the Defenders shows, because they're not canon to the MCU exactly. Or at least their canonicity is more vague than something like Agatha. The only Marvel TV project that's better than Agatha, in my opinion, is Werewolf by Night. And that's only because there are 2 episodes of Agatha All Along that I consider to be much, much weaker than the rest. One is episode 6. That episode is genuinely bad, and genuinely deserves at least a little bit of scorn, especially because it contributed nothing to the overall story of the show, and the show would literally be better off without it.
I'm back. Sorry.
But I guess getting into why episode 6 pissed me off as much as it did kind of helps me get back on track with what I was trying to get to about the show. Honestly, it really felt to me and to a lot of other people, it seems, that if anything, Agatha All Along is sort of an apology for what was wrong with WandaVision, especially WandaVision episode 9. That's part of the reason I hate episode 6, because they made the mistake of not leaving well enough alone. they brought back Ralph Bohner. And part of the good qualities of Agatha all along was it. Okay, I'm going to have to tie this back to how I felt about WandaVision. My thoughts on WandaVision are the first 7 episodes of WandaVision are largely disposable. Episode 8 of WandaVision is really, 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 really fucking good. And episode 9 of WandaVision crashes and burns off of a fucking cliff like Wile E. Coyote on mescaline. And as such, a lot of the well-researched, well-thought-out witchy vibes that episode 8 had in spades when Agatha was schooling Wanda on the fundamentals, quote-unquote, and then kind of plays Ghost of Christmas Past with her using that one memory spell she used. That was the stuff in WandaVision that I thought we should have seen a lot more of. And in many ways, it seems like Jack Schaefer or somebody else working for Disney with regards to Agatha all along fixated on the parts of episode 8 that were good and like doubled and tripled down on them. So in many ways, Agatha all along almost feels like an apology for WandaVision. It feels as though Jack Schaefer realized that she pissed everyone off, and she has alluded to this in previous interviews that she didn't think to do any research before making WandaVision, and she was surprised everyone gave a shit about the mystery aspects of WandaVision. But unlike most writers for modern day corporations and ruiners of modern day IP, she actually seems to have taken the fact that she did something wrong in WandaVision, especially episode 9 of WandaVision, to heart. And in many ways, Agatha all along is the apology for her mistakes regarding WandaVision. And for most of Agatha all along, I was fully on board and fully accepting that apology, because they took what I considered to be the good aspects of WandaVision episode 8 and they doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on them while basically distancing itself from everything that I thought was meh or disposable about the first 7 episodes, and especially the things about episode 9 that I thought were terrible. Episode 6 is the one exception, because they did stupidly try to bring back Ralph Bohner, who single-handedly shat on the audience's intelligence, and his mere existence is an irritant to me. The good news is episode 6 is utterly and completely disposable. Like, it is the one episode of the entire show you could probably skip and lose nothing whatsoever. The bad news is it does kind of throw a wrench in my work, or throw a wrench in my works with regards to seeing Agatha all along as an apology for WandaVision. That being said, given that their only major mistake was trying to bring back Ralph Bohner, which, by the way, don't misunderstand me. I'm not upset that you brought him back, or at least that's not entirely what made me angry about episode 6. What upset me about episode 6 was you brought him back and left him the same character that he was at the end of WandaVision. What would have been the smart thing to do, and would have continued in the vein of Agatha all along is an apology for WandaVision point of view, is if you brought him back and revealed that one of the fan theories was right after all. Retcon him into somebody like Mephisto or Chthon or Nicholas Scratch or whomever. That would have been the smart thing to do. The best thing to do with Ralph, if you're not willing to do that, is just shut the fuck up and leave him the fuck alone. Refuse to acknowledge his existence hereafter, and bygones can be bygones.
Hey, Dom.
But yeah.
Maybe we should also talk about a teen who we all know was Billy Kaplan.
Yeah, the obvious correct answer was in fact the obvious correct answer. He is Billy. He is Wanda's son. He is
or
the person who will one day become known
Wiccan?
as Wiccan. Yeah.
Actually, I'm
I don't
curious.
know. I don't know how literal they're going to be with that, but
I'm curious. I'm curious.
we'll
No,
see.
hold on.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you think they're gonna have him go by Asgardian first, like they did in the comics?
I highly doubt it.
Um,
That would be remarkably stupid because he has no connection to Asgard whatsoever in this
I'm just
continuity.
okay. Well, that was the first code name he went by. I'm just saying.
Right,
Just
but like I say, he has no like maybe if he took some magical pointers from Loki or something, then you might have a reason to call him that, but short of something like that, he has no connection in this continuity to Asgard at all. It would be remarkably stupid for them to
just
use it.
it was just a question. What was that? One thing, fantastic character. Gay, but that's not his entire character. It's been a while since I've seen that. So
Yeah, he's ironically, I think he was a better character before the sigil dropped than he was after it dropped. And I do wonder how much the sigil's existence affected his own like self knowledge. Like did the sigil that was cast upon him by Lilia, spoilers, affect his knowledge of himself as well? I wonder.
that's a good question.
That seems to have been what they implied by the differences in his personality before and after it dropped, and his kind of sudden heel turn at the end of episode 5. Um, I think that's what we're supposed to intuit happened, was that the sigil was affecting his own knowledge of himself. Which does make sense given that Agatha tells us that the kind of redaction spell that the sigil is works on the witch who casted it as well. So if a witch casts a sigil on another witch, would that affect the person it was casted on as well, I guess is my question. But yes, Teen is one, they don't ever play the "you're a man, so you're not important" card. I was fully expecting them to trivialize him for being a male. They never did that. And not only did they never do that, they kind of gave him quite a lot of the baselines. Like the moment I realized just how much in for good shit we were with Agatha all along was the part in episode 3 where he starts talking about quote unquote analog magic and the emphasis of witchcraft needs to be on the craft part. That was, first of all, that was the moment when I started to like him. Or actually, no, I tell a slight lie, because there was a similar line in episode 2, where he said something to the effect of, "I've studied, but studying can only take you so far. I need power." That was when I started to like him. And then when he said that thing about analog magic in episode 3, that was the moment where I was fully on board with him. But yeah, they gave him a lot of competent moments and a lot of well-researched opinions on the subject matter of magic. And
Right.
they never once trivialized him because something something something, you're a man, so grr. Which
I think
again goes back to they never try to conflate witchhood with womanhood in this show, which is nice.
so. I was gonna say again, if you want to make the argument like you did with like the feminism witchhood thing before with Lilia, most of the time the girls give him shit because he's a kid. You know, like although I think that was rather rare if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and even with regards to the whole Lilia being offended by Hollywood
Again, you
portrayal
don't
of witchcraft thing.
you don't have to explain it. Uh, I get it.
Yeah, but that was basically the sum total of anything of relating to feminism, and they never once tried to create the parallel between witchcraft or witches and feminism. So that was nice.
And it's kind of how to be fair, it always came when I was watching that. It always came across like how you always bitch how often magic is misrepresented in media and stuff.
Yeah, and ironically, that's not really the case here. I honestly can't remember the last time I saw a show or a like fantasy or superhero TV show that actually did this much good, this much correct, for lack of a better word, representation.
Right, and there's something else I want to bring up.
Yeah.
Regarding Billy. Dawn and I had a brief discussion about it last night when we hung out. Excuse me. Regarding episode 8, the scene that really struck me, because there were some moments in this show that, to be fair, it was episode 7, episode 8, that actually really kind of get me emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Everything before and after those 2 episodes, not really so. Was Agatha coaching? Spoilers for obviously we've been in spoiler territory for a bit now.
Mm-hmm.
But
here there shall be spoilers. You have been warned. Proceed with caution.
Yeah. Probably should have said that maybe like 10, 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say was one of my favorite scenes from episode 8 was during the last trial, where Agatha was coaching Billy through so he could leave the Witch's Road. Was him, because if I remember correctly, because Billy and Tommy, the Maximoff twins, are twins, their souls were connected, and Billy had been keeping Tommy's soul within him for the whole time. And I believe that was implied, but I could be wrong, obviously. Either
See,
way,
I don't think that's what I don't think that's what happened. I think what happened was that because Tommy's powers don't involve magic, he didn't have a mechanism to stay alive, quote unquote. Billy did, because Billy's powers were magical in nature. So
Dalton, that's not relevant to what I'm saying. I understand that you're trying to clarify, and that's fine. But I would like to
my point is that I don't think Billy has been carrying Tommy with him this whole time. I think what's happened instead is Agatha showed him how to essentially change time or rewrite time.
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Exactly
okay, whatever.
What
it was vague. Let's be fully honest. It was kind of vague.
Not really, no.
Okay, my point, because it's not. It's not relevant. Don, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a dick, but I'm trying to get my point across of why I like the scene. I'm sorry for yelling. Okay, that's not
Go
cool.
ahead.
I'm sorry. What I was trying to say was why I like the scene. Obviously, the context, and thank you if. Again, I watched it one time like 2 days ago, so my mind it's not as fresh. So probably misremembering. So thank you for clarifying. Thank you. So Agatha's coaching Billy to find Tommy's soul a body that is fresh. And it's shown that a kid is another boy who, to be fair, I was actually surprised that they were going. That's actually one of the darker moments in this show. I'll be fully honest.
This show does go quite dark by Marvel standards as well, which is nice.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And also, from what I remember of, what is his name? I know Tommy, but like his
Speed.
Speed. Really?
Yeah, it's stupid.
I mean, okay, it's fine for a speedster. It makes sense. And a lot of like speedster, like cool speedster names have been taken already. So I was gonna say Speedball, but I know that's another Marvel character.
I think that might be DC actually.
No,
Or
it's
is
a
it?
Marvel character. He's he's a character who's responsible for Civil War happening in the comics.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but this it's mentioned that the kid who is, for one thing, being drowned by a bunch of other kids as a prank.
Which,
What the?
what in the actual fuck? But yeah.
It's mentioned that he has no one to really care for him. And he's all alone. Um, which is very close to Tommy's comic origin because when he was reincarnated, he we had a troubled life growing up, if I remember correctly.
Question is, did Billy help him in that regard as well in the comics? I don't remember if it was Billy who conjured his brother
I'm
in
not
the
sure.
comics.
I can't remember. But
I mean, like I say, it makes sense because Speed's powers aren't magic based.
no,
Or,
yeah.
I mean, they are in the sense that it was Wanda's magic that made them, but
Right,
he doesn't have any particular affinity for or the use of magic, is what I mean.
right. But Billy, for one thing, is it implied that he's feeling the kid drown too?
Um,
Because how he's speaking, how he's like acting when he's getting that clear image of that kid to put Tommy's soul in, as the kid is.
I I saw it as just grief more so than like any sort of empathetic feeling the same thing, but I might be being a moron.
Well, I mean, to be fair, if he has if he has power, if Billy has power similar to his mom, I believe, also had some type of empathetic ability. I mean, she could read minds, and he can read minds. I feel like it's a mixture of a lot of things. To be fair,
Yeah, I'm like you say, the scene does go by rather quickly because what
yeah,
I saw how I saw that scene was Agatha showing Billy how to essentially retcon time because she takes him back to the moment Wanda took down the Westview hex, and she
I thought that was
realizes
him. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
what she realized is that Tommy doesn't have any reality bending or magical powers, so he doesn't have the capacity to exist as like an astral form in the same way that Billy did. So she showed him how to go back in time and take his brother's essence into himself and then place it somewhere else.
Wait, okay, so yeah, Tommy would have been around for 2 years at the very least with the reincarnated thing, like Billy, right?
Yeah, which we know is pretty sure we're pretty sure that didn't happen because Billy wasn't sensed by Wanda when she was looking for them because of Lilia's sigil.
God, I
But
don't.
Tommy would have been sensed if he had existed at any point during the time period of Multiverse Madness, but he wasn't. So I'm guessing this retcon is somewhat retroactive in the sense that he didn't exist until Wanda showed Billy how to rewrite time, and now
You
he
mean
does
no?
because
You
Billy
mean
rewrote
Agatha?
it.
You mean Agatha, not Wanda?
Yeah, but I assume that this retcon is retroactive in the sense that
Okay,
Tommy didn't have
I
any
thought it
means
was
to exist until
okay.
Agatha showed Billy how to rewrite time.
Okay, I might not have been as paying attention as much as I should have because to me it came across as like it was being current rather than retconning time. So that might be
Yeah,
on me.
yeah,
Either way. That
yeah.
again, back to
Go
the point
go
why I
ahead.
like back
Yeah.
to the point why I like this scene was, well, again, like you said, with the grief and stuff. It's like, for one thing, again, the actor playing Billy is fucking phenomenal.
Joe Locke.
Of course, you know him.
I I had to look it up once I saw him being good in Agatha, didn't I?
Yeah.
Apparently,
Also,
he's been in other shows. This is obviously the first time I've seen him, but he apparently
yeah,
has.
I agree. I expected that. Yeah, but obviously, again, but the scene that the line in that scene that hits the hardest for me is, God damn it, what was I might paraphrase it. So if Dalton,
Am
if
I
you
killing this kid so that my brother can be born? Essentially, I think was the line.
yeah, that's the line. I feel like it is paraphrased, but yeah, along the sentiment, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
know the one you mean. I don't remember the exact wording either, but that was, I think, the gist of it. He
but it's
wanted
just
to,
the way
he wanted to know if he was forcing someone else to die, so his brother has an empty vessel.
I do want to say no.
Yeah, because I if I re- I remember there was a line where Billy says, "I can't find anyone," and Agatha's response was, "Don't give me that.
And 20,
125 people die every
no,
second. Find one."
no, it was 120, I think. Either
But
way,
yeah, somewhere in there. Point being, Tommy needs an empty vessel to exist. I don't think Billy's magic forced anyone to have an accident. I think, like Agatha was telling him, 125 people die every second. Find one that's empty.
right. Um, also, yeah, it's like again the way it's even said and the music and how it all just kind of crescendos. It's an impactful moment. And again, I think that also like really, and again, you know Wiccan more than I do, but
Mhm.
I I I'm of the belief that that properly encapsulates his character. That he's very scared of his own power, even though like he is one of the most powerful, has the potential to be one of the most powerful magical users in the universe.
I will say that the MCU kind of upscaled him, though. He's nowhere near as powerful as he's implied to be here in the comics. He's just a magic user. He's not supposed to. He doesn't have the reality bending powers that Wanda does in the comics.
Really, huh? I remember seeing some videos where they had mentioned that he had the potential to be like,
Right, but her power in the comics is amped by a probability manipulation mutation, and that's funneled into Cthulhu's chaos magic or Mephisto's, depending on which continuity we're going with.
I would say Catan, but all right,
I'm assuming we're going Cthulhu because they actually did name drop him in Multiverse of Madness,
right.
and frankly, I
Uh,
think he's the more interesting one anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Point being, and we see this both in the comics and in the MCU, because if Billy had Wanda's chaos magic, his magic would be red. It's not.
it's
It's
blue.
blue, which is, if we're tying in episode 8 of WandaVision when we saw Agatha's first flashback where she kills her coven, it seems like the default color of witchcraft is blue, because that was the color of her entire coven as well, and of course now Billy's. So one assumes that his powers are default witchcraft.
Mm. Which makes me curious. Where do they derive their power from?
The witches in the Marvel universe, at least in the comics, they derive their power by working with the ambient magic of nature.
Okay.
Sorcerers in Marvel get their power through what we in the industry would call high magic, which is borrowing energy from
The Vishanti.
beings from other planes and so on.
Yes.
Well, the Vishanti, yes, but also there are multiple power
Well,
source
okay. Just
entities.
I would say at least the order that Doctor Strange is a part of uses the Vishanti's magic the most.
It would be fabulous if that had been confirmed already, but I will wait for Doctor Strange 3. Hopefully Sam Raimi will do me another solid,
All right.
and we'll finally get the Vishanti.
Um, what else? I do want to say one little nitpick of mine, and I mentioned this to Dalton before.
Mhm.
I don't want Wiccan's first costume. because I'm going to assume they're going to give him a better one later on, maybe in the movies, if he gets into the movies.
It does look a little cosplay, doesn't
I
it?
think, and I mentioned this before, is the issue of the headband.
Yeah, it could stand to have been a little bit more ornate, I think.
I just said bigger, to be fully honest, because it seems too small for his head.
It should function more as a crown, I think. And
Either that,
that's
or
the
they were
issue.
going with like those, or they were going with like those silver band crowns, you know?
Yeah, but either way, it looks too much like a like sweatband than a crown.
Yeah. Um. Although I did like the cape. The cape looked good.
I mean, Edna Mode is of course coping and seething, but
Okay.
that's inevitable.
To be fair, there's been someone actually made mention that she made the heroes she made reference to in the first Incredibles movie that she made the costumes for originally, and she's saying no capes out of grief. That she basically
Yeah.
caused death of heroes or friends.
Yeah, Dinah Guy, Strato Girl, I forget all the ones she mentioned, but there was a whole laundry list of people that.
You know, Strato Girl was actually a teenager.
Hmm?
Strato Girl was a teenager. You know, the one who got sucked into their jet engine.
Yeah.
Yeah, teenager, a kid.
But yeah, I think we can assume that. But someone please give the MCU its own Edna Mode, please, like, or some equivalent of Edna Mode, because
they
I
did.
do like the idea of fashion designer plus like the Q style technical aspect of.
Dalton, they did. In She-Hulk.
Yes, I remember that dude. However, much like everything else in that show, that character is Shies, so we need a better one.
To be fair, he's also based off a Taylor character from the comics.
Yes, and any fans of that character should be ashamed of what happened to him in She-Hulk, just like the rest of us are ashamed by basically everything else that happened to She-Hulk.
If I remember the story correctly, he's just an ordinary like New York tailor, like old New York dude.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently he did like he sewed up a costume for someone, I can't remember who, but apparently he was so good and his talent was well renowned that both heroes and villains go to him. Like there's a panel that shows Doctor Doom visiting him and having
in the She-Hulk show, they just made him the generic effeminate twink fashion design stereotype.
To be fair, seems to populate a lot of that place.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's a reason why that stereotype exists. I'm just saying that as someone who happens to be gay, I don't need your social justice pandering. Give me a character I can actually like they did in WandaVision with Teen. And again, like I say, I think his personality prior to getting the sigil removed was a little bit more likable than his temper tantruming post sigil. But yeah,
you forgot something else to describe yourself. Effeminate twink.
Yes, thank you. But just because I am one doesn't mean I like them. There are far too many twinks, and we should gas the twinks. Is what I'm saying.
Wow, what's with the internal? I can't finish that joke. I'm sorry. I was gonna say internalize, you know.
Yeah, internalized homophobia, but you couldn't get through with it with a straight face, could you? Which, to be fair, is the correct response to that absurdity. Don't forget to breathe.
Oh, I've almost passed out from laughing.
Yeah, don't forget to breathe. I will resort to necromancy if I have to, but I really would rather not have to.
I feel like that would just be a horrifying experience.
Especially because necromancy takes like 6 fucking months, so your corpse would have probably begun to rot by then.
The fuck? Maybe you should just have spells ready for whatever purpose.
You want me to preemptively like you want me to preemptively set up a necromancy spell that takes like 6 months to cast?
I mean,
This
that
is
would
the most
understand why.
bizarre form of first aid ever, probably.
Uh, anything else worth mentioning for Agatha all along? Oh well, I guess we could talk about episode 9 because I think it's weird. Like I don't. Oh wait, no, Aubrey Plaza as Mistress Death.
I mean, I'm of two minds on the idea of her being a green witch, because I get what they were going for, which is death is a like part of the cycle of nature, hence green witch. But that being said, as a practitioner in my own right, she should be a goes in the Greek sense. Like her powers should be related to the underworld in some way. Now, granted, that could trend too far in the other direction and make her a stereotype, but given how well researched and well written the magic was in Agatha All Along, which, by the way, this show is how you do magic in the MCU. From this point forward, this show is the gold standard for like the bare minimum standard of how you write magic in the MCU, because they actually did their homework. And like I say, as soon as teens started talking about how important the knowledge and skill aspect of magic was over the power aspect, I was immediately on board with this concept. The idea of the labor intensive manual acts of magic being more important than the sparkly bits is good.
But I thought she did well.
No, she did. And again, it would have been very easy to make her the villain. I like that they didn't make her the villain, because Agatha straight up tries to do a evil banishing circle, and Death just laughed at her because she's neither good nor evil. She just is
Although,
a fundamental part of nature.
well, to be fair, Mistress Death is kind of plain evil in the comics.
It depends on the comic of how she's written and everything. It is one of those. I don't think Marvel has a like universe Bible that they can pull from when they write these characters,
Fair
and
enough.
so each writer tends to just do with her whatever they want to do with her. But at least in Agatha All Along, I don't know how she'll be used later on. Probably it will bite us all in the ass, because unfortunately that just seems to be how the MCU is a lot of the time. But at least as her portrayal of Death is contained to Agatha All Along, I like what they did with her, because it would have been easy to make her the villain, and they didn't.
Although it makes
Because
me wonder.
Go ahead.
Well, they're introducing Lady Death now, and Death was always a big part of Thanos. And I'm not saying
they didn't have the rights to the character at the time.
Really.
Yep. She was bundled with a bunch of Fantastic Four characters for some reason.
Really?
Yeah, they had to buy Mistress Death's rights back.
Huh.
That's why I really wanted them to use Hela in place of Mistress Death in Endgame, but they didn't.
What are you gonna do?
I mean, regardless of whether Death is Cate Blanchett or Aubrey Plaza, Let anyone who wouldn't sacrifice half-life in the universe to please this woman cast the first stone.
Although I do think they made Thanos a lot more interesting without
No,
Lady Death.
I like the like almost eco-terrorist population thing. I just think it could have been added to rather than replaced.
No, that's fair.
The
That's
the
fair.
comic equivalent.
Again, it's also weird that there's always a weird love triangle with Thanos, Deadpool, and Mistress Death in the comics.
Again, I don't blame anyone insofar as Death looks like Aubrey Plaza. Although at the moment she seems to have a thing for Agatha.
Yeah. Do you think she?
And
Wait.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah. But, do you think Agatha? Because spoilers, by the way, Agatha dies.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Because again, death is a natural inevitability, and you can't blast death away,
But
no matter how powerful you are.
I'm just remembering the deal she made in episode 8. Was it episode 8?
Yes.
Okay. She made a deal with Death, and a part of that agreement was that she never, after Agatha dies, that she never sees Death.
Except, according to Death, Agatha didn't live up to her end of that bargain, and so it was null.
Well, no, she did. She did technically give. She had Billy. She manipulated Billy to be willing to give himself up to Agatha, for Agatha, to Death. And was willing to play. And was
Yeah,
playing.
but by that time, Death had already called it off because when
I'm just trying to think of the explanation.
When Agatha got off the road, she goes up to Death and goes, "I want my prize," and she says, "I got you the kid out," and Death responds, "And where is he now?" I.e., you didn't live up to your end.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm also just trying to, because in episode 9, which I think we can both agree is, it's a weird episode. I don't think it's bad, mind you, but
it's not bad, but it's almost entirely unnecessary.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say was, I was trying to find the explanation why she's a ghost, because technically she's having unfinished business on Earth. So I was thinking about that deal, and maybe that's why she's bound to the Earth.
That's not the reason.
I'm just.
It's because no matter what she says, she sacrificed herself for Billy so that he could live a life. So
Okay.
So she's tethered to him now. That combined with the fact that she can't face Nick yet, because he tries to do an exorcism on her, and she refuses to leave because she can't face Nick.
I thought it was banishment.
Yeah, he tries to exorcise her, and she refuses to go because she can't face Nick. So it's a combination of being willing to sacrifice her life.
No, I thought the
Billy.
spell was banishment, because with exorcism that implies that the spirit is possessing someone.
No, you can exorcise a location too, dude.
Huh. I didn't know that. It's
yeah. An exorcism is technically any formula that is supposed to force spirits out. And he tries it on her, and he keeps asking her why she refuses to go, and after the exorcism starts to take, she screams, "Because I can't face him yet," referring to Nick. And then Billy stops because he realizes how much of a dick he's being about it.
Out of the curiosity, because again, I don't know if this technically counts as a deal, but episode 8, when we get Agatha's backstory in the first half.
9.
Was it 9?
That was 9, yes.
I could have sworn it was 8.
Nope.
Okay.
Episode 8 was the final trial, fighting Death, and then Death saying something to the effect of, I'm taking one of you, you guys can decide which. And Agatha ends up sacrificing herself so that Billy can live his life.
Okay. But I mean, I don't think it's a deal, because Agatha threatens Death that she will hate Death forever if she takes her son before he has a life.
And that's when Death gives her quote unquote special treatment by giving Nikki, I think it was a decade that he had.
Or
Because he was supposed to be stillborn. That was the original implication, was that he was supposed to be born stillborn because Death was one of the parents.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was curious who the father was, or father of the child.
Jack Schaefer confirmed that the other parent is Death itself. That's why Nikki was stillborn. But she gives Agatha special treatment by giving Nikki sort of a half-life. And then she has just long enough to grow attached to him, and then Nick dies.
It could not have
And
been
that's why Agatha hates her, because instead of allowing her son to have a full life, she gave him just long enough so that Agatha could get attached and then have to deal with the pain of losing
And
him.
actually gives a lot of that actually makes the episode 8 confrontation. It was early episode 8.
Why do you let people believe those lies about you and Nikki?
Yeah,
and then she says, because the truth is too awful.
Yeah, that really, wow, that gives you a lot of new different. That really, and I'm also trying to look for Death's God, that must have been really hard for Death too.
Because she knows that because she was one of the parents, it's going to be born dead because she is Death.
Well, no, also like literally taking your child to the afterlife before they've lived a full life.
I mean, to be fair, given how much power Mistress Death has in the afterlife of the Marvel Universe, that's not exactly a bad ending for her. It's a bad ending for Agatha because she barely gets used to having a son, and then time's up.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Death regards it as special treatment because she gave him 10 years to begin with. Which means that she, the avatar of Death, actually created life where there was none. Which is genuinely anathema to her nature, and that's why Death thinks that she gave Agatha special treatment, and why Agatha thinks that she did that just to basically fuck with her. Hence the I missed you and I hate you thing in episode 2. Or end of episode 1, I think.
I think it was episode 1. It was before she let Teen out of the closet.
Yeah. So yeah, it would have been the end of episode 1 after she was awake, but before they set off to find the coven.
Yeah. And then the last scene where it shows kind of herself in her full Death form, I guess.
Yeah.
And the one line she says to Billy telepathically, "You may go, I think Aubrey Plaza really sold that of like both the ancientness of death and
Yeah.
kind of the. I think there was a hint of emotion in there of like for Agatha.
I think the reason why Death ended up honoring her side of the bargain with Billy was because of the fact that Agatha was actually willing to give up her life for Billy, which I'm sure for Death that isn't like Agatha. Like, I mean, Death and Agatha were literally a couple, so she knows Agatha probably better than anyone else does.
I am.
And she
I
she, she would have
am.
known how significant it is that Agatha was actually willing to give up her life for this kid.
I am genuinely curious though how they hooked up.
I mean, Death, one assumes, can take whatever form Death wants because
No, I mean like how they got together. You know.
it it's never really addressed. My thought process is they met after Agatha kills her coven,
That would make sense. Yeah.
and then they were a thing sometime in like the 1720s, probably, because Agatha's coven and her trial by fire was in 1693. The flashback that we saw in episode 9 of Agatha um, was taking place, I think, in 1750. So for at least a few years in between 1693 and 1750, they must have been a thing. Then they conceive Nikki together. Then Agatha realizes that Nikki's been born stillborn because she sees death coming for him, and then the whole "please don't do this, I will hate you forever" blah blah. Death gives him special treatment by giving him a decade's worth of life. He dies. They are presumably on the outs for the remainder of the years. At some point, Agatha acquires the Darkhold. Um, then she starts using the ballad to lure covens together and siphon away more power. And then, well, the rest is basically self-explanatory with regards to what happened in WandaVision.
Yeah, I do. So again, going back to episode 9, it's not a bad episode. I think, at least. I don't
It
think it's entirely necessary, but
Yeah, honestly, it could have been a post-credit. It could have been reduced down to a post-credit scene, and nothing particular would have been lost. I
mhm.
also don't know if I entirely buy that Billy created the road. Because here's the thing. Remember what we were told in episode 2 that within a 3-mile radius there's enough people to form a coven, and that covens, when they're brought together, bring out a latent spark in each other. How many witches either, died by Agatha's hand with the whole siphoning thing, or just died in a last moment of desperation and their last thought was the witch's road?
Which would be like in a collective unconsciousness.
Yeah,
Especially.
like how if there's, because we see in the case of Agatha's mother first that witches can be turned into ghosts in order, if they are tied to the plane by unfinished business. Based on how Agatha operates, she should, in theory, be like hounded by an army of ghosts. She's killed coven after coven after coven with the trap that is the ballad. And one, how many people died with their last thought being the witch's road? What happened to that residual spark that gets brought out by the proximity of a coven? And if there was enough power to create a ghost, why hasn't Agatha basically been hounded by an army of ghosts? Answer: what if their unfinished business was the road? And so the energy that would have gone to making them ghosts went to the creation of the road itself. Not
How
to
do you
mention, not to mention, Lorna Wu, the
protection
woman
league?
who rewrote
Oh,
the ballad.
right.
If the minimum size of a coven is 5, and there's a coven's worth of people in a 3-mile radius, how many hundreds of thousands or even millions of like latent witches did Lorna draw? And we know she siphoned off their power to create the protection spell in the first place. And I think it's fair to say that Lorna believed that the Witch's Road exists,
Hmm.
and that Billy was one of her fans at one point, because we see him geeking out in episode 2 about how awesome her version of the ballad is.
Right.
So 5 is the minimum size of a coven. Multiply that by however many hundreds of thousands or even millions of
And
people
then add
Lorna has drawn
right,
over
and
the
then
years.
add to Billy's magic as well.
Yeah. And apparently his magic was powerful enough to customize the road in his favor anyway. So
Okay, if nothing else, I could somewhat of a theory, or at least an explanation I could give.
Mhm.
Maybe the road eventually through all of that residual, both like final thoughts, the collective unconsciousness of all those witches, the
Yeah,
magical
all the
spark.
latent magic.
But it was never accessed before. One, because Agatha never believed in it.
She also never ever let the ballad finish. She
Right.
always was siphoning their powers before it ended.
Right.
Which brings up
Um,
the question of, had she been forced to see the thing through to the end, would the road have opened? And two, actually, there are 2 other variables that are worth sort of looking into here.
mhm.
One, when we saw Agatha's mother in episode 5, she treats the Witch's Road as if it exists. And given how much she hates her daughter, it probably would have been child play to say something to the effect of, "My treacherous daughter made that whole thing up. You've all been fooled." But she doesn't. She says, "You must complete the Witch's Road alone without her," which implies that she believes it's a thing. And hell, even when Death and Agatha are talking in episode 8, um, Agatha says he wants his brother back. That's almost like wasting the road's time. Which, if she believes that the Witch's Road is a con, what whose time is he wasting other than quote unquote his own? And if that's and come to think of it, even the fact that the Witch's Road took so many cues from Billy doesn't disprove the road, because Agatha says in episode 3 the road is supposed to change for the coven. So either the Witch's Road didn't exist, but because so many people channeled their hopes and dreams and wishes and whatnot, and the residual like magical spark into the concept of the road, it might have created the road. Or maybe the ballad of the Witch's Road is actually older than Agatha knew, because according to her, her son made the song up, her son who happens to be the spawn of Mistress Death. So that's another canard. Or is it just the simple fact of all the residual magic of all the covens that ever tried it that have built into the road, and Billy was just the one that finished the road essentially? Or even still, we know that Billy's powers have the capacity to rewrite time, both because of what happened with Tommy and what happened with his quote-unquote parents when he got home, saying something to the effect of, "You've only been gone for 24 hours," when we know that the events of the show lasted longer than 24 hours.
Well,
So
the Witch's Road is another realm, and what we always know about different realms or planes of existence, time moves very differently. So
yeah, so even if Billy did quote-unquote create the road, his powers have the capacity to rewrite time, and it exists in a pocket dimension. So even if he was the first one to quote unquote make the road, what if the road sort of retroactively always existed now? Especially because he didn't do with his spell what Wanda did with hers at the end of WandaVision. He never unmade the road. And if he never unmade it, then it's still there. And if it's still there, it's possible that other people could access it. Not to mention the fact that how many witches have tried to access it over the years without Agatha being close enough to siphon them off.
Yeah. God, that is a real head scratcher there.
Yeah, that's why I'm not mad about the way it adds up, because there are too many loose threads for that to be as simple as it is.
Right.
Especially because older witches like Lilia, who's older than Agatha, believe that the Witch's Road existed. And you'd think that if it were a new concept to her, she would go, "Oh, that must be something the younger ones have made up or something." But she never reacts that way either. She believes wholeheartedly that the road exists, even though Agatha thinks she made it up.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. But long story short, back to the review portion of the review. This show really, really heavily resonated with me. Both as a Marvel fan and also as a magical practitioner. The only reason that it's not the best TV project that's canon to the MCU is because Werewolf by Night exists. And the only reason it's not as good as Werewolf by Night is because episodes 6 and 9 kind of let down the rest of the show. But it certainly is the best use of magic we've seen in the entire MCU so far. And anyone who tries to tell you that it's even in the same ballpark as the Acolyte, laugh in their fucking face. Because they either weren't paying attention or they wanted it to be as bad as the Acolyte for no explainable reason.
Curious, who's the potion witch again?
Jennifer Hale.
I'm curious where her story's gonna go, because she got her magic back.
Yeah, she's unbound now.
Yeah,
I did like that twist too, where like Agatha was on financial hard times in the 1920s, so she essentially sold her services, and this one random guy comes up to her and goes, "Can you help me bind this witch?" And Agatha does it without even realizing who she's binding. Lol. Because that's such an Agatha like thing, I think.
It also made mention to be, like, Lillian made mention of her, the High Priestess.
Yeah. Which untapped potential that she can't or won't use. Yeah.
Which makes me curious where her story's going to go, because I want to believe that they'll use this character later on for something.
Well, I mean, in the comic, she's the cousin of Johnny Blaze, so there's that.
Wait, what?
Yeah, she's the cousin of Johnny Blaze, and she winds up hanging out with Man-Thing. She's a supporting character in Man-Thing comics. Jennifer.
I thought this was a fully written character.
Nope. Jennifer Kale is the cousin of Johnny Blaze, and a supporting character in Man-Thing comics.
Wait a minute. How? Because she's supposed to be a few centuries old?
That is correct. Although I don't know if that was the case in the comics.
Well, obviously I'm making mention of the show.
Right, but in the show, she's at least a century old because she was around in the 1920s to have her magic bound. Which I'm curious how she stayed young without access to magic,
Well,
or
she
was it just kind of a because her magic was stopped up, it like she fed on her own magic to stay alive kind of thing.
well, it was also made mention with her magic. It was made mention in like one of the behind the scenes featurettes, like on YouTube, that she got really into alchemy. So there could be a possibility that she used some formula of alchemy to keep herself young.
That's possible because we know that analog magic, quote unquote, which again I'm stealing that phrase. It's too good not to use. Um, we know that analog magic still works for her.
Mhm.
So it's possible that she could have made some alchemical elixir, and there was also mention in the show that she used to be a root worker. That you know that's an option too. So either through root work or through alchemy, she might have found a formula to keep herself young. Or it might
Uh,
just be that the magic she couldn't use was used to keep her alive, kind of thing.
all right. Shall we move on?
Yeah. Continuing on. Long story short, Agatha's awesome, and I can't wait for it to come out on physical media. There's also a tarot deck that's tied into Agatha that I can't wait to get.
All right. So this is from Polygon.com. Don sent this, obviously. What does the Marvel Cinematic Universe think a witch is exactly? That's written by Susanna Polo, published September 25th, 2024. Are you a good witch, or a bad witch, or a scarlet witch?
I mean, there are other options. Lol.
This was published in September, so Agatha All Along didn't even come out yet.
Was it late September though?
Yeah, September 25th.
Okay, so the 2-part pilot would have been out because that was I think the 21st or 23rd or whatever the fuck. I don't remember.
There are a number of reasons to be watching Agatha All Along. Maybe you're here for Catherine Hahn hawning it up, hawning around, or to see Aubrey Plaza goth it up, or because you'd follow Patty LuPone to hell and back. Maybe it's just the season for witchy fall vibes. Dalton.
I mean, I'm going with D, all of the above.
And if you're like me, you're also wondering if this will be the installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that actually explains what the hell magic is in this setting. It does.
Again, it's probably the best use of magic we've seen in the entire MCU so far. It shouldn't have fucking taken this long, but it is probably the best use of magic we've seen so far.
Agatha all along seems perfectly poised to answer questions like what is a witch? Where does their power come from? Do they get it naturally? Do they have to learn how? What does it allow them to do, given that a character called the Scarlet Witch has been in 5 MCU movies and had her own television show, with 2 Doctor Strange movies and Spider-Man No Way Home on the side? You'd think that at least some of these questions would have been answered already. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe has undergone this odd flip where it began drawing a line around the supernatural and firmly labeling it as advanced alien science. Thor understood particle physics, and the Tesseract could be studied by S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists.
Oh, don't remind me of the Arthur C. Clarke bullshit. The correct answer was to get as far away from that as possible, and I'm glad they have.
Even the Scarlet Witch's powers were triggered by the Infinity Stones, not magical study. I mean, to be fair, she always had inherent magical abilities, even in the comics.
To borrow from Agatha's phrasing in WandaVision, the Mind Stone amplified what otherwise would have died on the vine.
Yeah. And is as the franchise finally dipped into the magical side of Marvel Comics, it has sort of skipped over the part where it would have explained why the Tesseract is advanced alien technology, which gives Captain Marvel her sciencey energy powers, and opens up sciencey wormholes to let an alien army in. But the Time Stone is a magical artifact that allows Doctor Strange to do magical time travel. And Thor and Loki gods, not aliens. Are the Celestials aliens or magic? I feel like with the Celestials, that's a bit of a
Yeah,
combination.
both and is the correct answer to that. Both and.
Because I mean, technically, yes, they're aliens. Because
But they're also beings of pure like existential cosmic energy. So, and their energies have nothing to do with the like electromagnetic forces or the strong
well,
weak nuclear forces and shit. So
not I would say not inherently, but more than likely, I think they do affect them than anything
right,
else.
they can manipulate them, but they can manipulate them by converting their already existing energy into other shit.
Again, I feel like we just go down a rabbit hole if we really try to like.
So again, yeah, the correct answer to that is both and. Also, the Time Stone is not a magical artifact. The Eye of
Yeah,
Agamotto is a magical artifact that for a while was housing the Time Stone. And I
yeah.
was so happy in Multiverse of Madness when we saw that the empty Eye of Agamotto has powers of its own, because Sam Raimi is a bro, and he did me a solid. Actually,
Really
he did
good.
me several solids in in Multiverse of Madness.
I mean, the guy grew up in the '60s reading Marvel comics when it was still fresh and new.
Yeah,
So
I also love that that was literally his response when somebody asked him why in the fuck does the Eye of Agamotto still have powers. His response was literally just read the books. Based.
oh, he did. He
Sa-
said that.
Sa-
Okay, cool.
Sam Raimi is the best thing that happened to the Doctor Strange franchise. Unironically,
Black Panther's heart-shaped herb allows him to commune with his deceased ancestors. Is that magic? What, if anything, differentiates all this from Agatha and her covens or witchcraft? I mean, to be fair, that does sound like magic with the heart-shaped herb.
I mean, I can explain it from a comics lore perspective. The difference between um witchcraft and sorcery as far as the comics are concerned is that witchcraft and shamanism draw from nature's inherent ambient magical energies, whereas sorcery is what we in the industry would refer to as high magic, where you're drawing energy from beings or planes of existence that are above or parallel or perpendicular to the mundane physical reality. So Doctor Strange's powers come from various different entities that he essentially has bargains or arrangements with. Usually the Vishanti, also, although he's also drawn from the Faltine, which ironically is the same species of magical entity as Dormammu, which I I want someone to write me a scene where Doctor Strange channels the flames of the Faltine and Dormammu gets offended. That I, that is, it's sitting right there, and no one has ever done anything with it, and it annoys me that no one's ever done anything with it. But there's also the ice demon known as Iktalam, as in the icy tendrils of Iktalam. There's a plane of existence called Mudipor, and one of Doctor Strange's spells is called the Mist of Mudipor, and etc. But witches, like Agatha Harkness, draw their power from essentially the ambient magic of nature itself, which ironically means that if anything, the Scarlet Witch should be called the Scarlet Sorceress, because her powers are closer to um, sorcery than they are witchcraft, because her powers come from either Chthon or Mephisto, depending on which storyline we're dealing with. And Chthon is actually the older brother of Ajtur, who is one of the three Vishanti. So, by all rights, Wanda should probably be referred to as the Scarlet Sorceress rather than the Scarlet Witch, but details. And as for the whole Asgardian, my ancient alien technology bullshit, That's not true in the comics because the comics were stupid enough not to pull the Ancient Alien card, which the movies should have also been, which is one of the reasons I really hate the first two Thor movies. But long story short, they've slowly moved away from the whole Arthur C. Clarke bullshit and into magic is actually magic at some point. No more so than Agatha All Along, which actually did bother to explain what in the fuck witchcraft is. And that's why I love the whole focus on witchcraft as a craft and the whole analog magic concept, i.e., knowledge and skill are more important than the freaking sparkly bits. But moving on.
Alright. Is magic... It's magic. Why does it need to be explained at all? Okay.
Because words and concepts mean things, and if you can't define a thing, you can't determine whether or not it is in fact a thing.
To be fair, there are some unknowable things. Like things that can be known but shouldn't be known, or...
I mean, there are things which would probably break a human mind all to hell if we tried to fit that. If we tried to fit certain things into a human mind, that's going to fuck up a human mind, but good. But that doesn't mean it can't be known, it just means that humans are not designed to contain a supercomputer's worth of information inside a very finite space.
Yeah, fair enough. But magic can be explained.
The short version, the short definition is magic is the extra-physical or paraphysical manipulation of life energy. It's called many different things in many different cultures: chi, prana, mana, spiritus vital, akasha, etc. But most forms of magic will either directly or indirectly boil down to the extra-physical or paraphysical manipulation of life energy. Short version.
You want to hear the first sentence?
Granted, there are different like epistemological paradigms in different schools of thought with regards to magic. I gave my definition because my definition is the one I find works best, but I'm sure that's true of literally everyone else who has a definition. But the point is, this is a thing that people can define, even if we sometimes disagree on how exactly to define it. In the same way that theoretical physics still works, even if there's some disagreement as to whether string theory or loop quantum gravity and so on exist. Moving forward.
You're not going to like the first sentence.
Oh, gods.
Oh, it's guys, you're not going to like the first paragraph here, so I'm going to read that whole thing. So please hold comments until I'm done.
I will restrain myself.
Well, I mean, it doesn't need to be explained. Magic definitionally doesn't have to make sense, and writers can do whatever they want. But there are real story advantages to telling your audience the rules, boundaries, and restrictions of the magic they're watching. This is the superhero genre, after all, home of the secret weakness.
Okay. For the love of all that is fucking sacred in every universe, and also everything that is profane within every universe, magic does and is capable of making sense. Magic is perfectly logical, as in it is logically consistent and logically axiomatically makes sense internally. Magic is perfectly logical, it is not scientific, because science, or I should say natural science, because the correct way of expressing magic is as the occult sciences, but the natural sciences are founded on axioms like naturalism, physicalism, logical sufficiency as opposed to logical necessity, and observational naturalism. Just because magic is not accordant with the natural sciences does not mean that it is illogical, irrational, and it certainly as fuck does not mean that magic's definition is in any way open-ended. Again, much like theoretical physicists can argue how far they think relativity is supposed to be trusted, or how applicable Newtonian physics is as a model in light of things like relativity, and as much as physicists can argue whether they think string theory or loop quantum gravity is a more predictive model, and so on. Just like that, there can be and is philosophical disagreement between practitioners as to what magic is or how it exactly functions. For example, the IRL chaos magicians try to combine Jungian psychology with chaos theory, hence why it's called chaos magic, and essentially believe that all spirits are essentially constructs of the human consciousness, something equivalent to how magic works in Mage of the Ascension or Mage of the Awakening. I disagree with such people, but their magic does function. The question is whether magic functions because of any one of these models or in spite of any one of these models. But regardless, people from different cultures, from different cultural backgrounds, from different historical periods, can look at each other's magic and acknowledge that it's magic, even if it is not their magic or doesn't work exactly 100% equivalent to how they would say their magic works. Like, for example, if you took Marie Laveau from 19th century New Orleans and you showed her Peter Carroll's chaos magic, she might wonder how in the fuck some of the things that work within chaos magic that don't work in terms of like the voodoo conception of magic. She might be curious as to how some of those things work, but she would A, be able to acknowledge that it works, and B, be able to recognize other cultures and belief forms of magic, even though they're not similar to her own. If magic was this nebulous thing that no one ever knew how it worked and no one ever bothered to define, you wouldn't have magicians from different cultures able to acknowledge that what they're looking at is some other culture's version of magic. And you wouldn't see crossover in procedures, but you very much do often see crossovers in procedures and even paradigms, because magic is perfectly rational and internally consistent and perfectly sensible. It's just not scientific. Your error, my dear, is saying something to the effect of science is the only method by which something can be rational. And that's fundamentally disagreeable, considering that science doesn't even claim to be founded on rationalism. It specifically claims to be founded upon empiricism. And rationalism and empiricism aren't the same fucking thing. This you would know if you had bothered to open any book or watch probably any YouTube video on the subject of magic from a practitioner's perspective at any point ever. One of the things that makes Agatha All Along such a great show is whether it be from a Marvel geekery standpoint, which it does do well, or from an actual practitioner standpoint, Agatha does a tremendous job of replicating the way magic is said to work within some circles. And you don't have to please everyone in every circle of magic to be quote unquote accurate to magic. But what's very clear is that Jack Schaefer and company did their homework magic wise. That's why so many practitioners, and by the way, I've checked this because I'm in a fan group for Agatha All Along, and I just on a whim asked, am I the only magical practitioner who loves Agatha All Along for how accurate and well researched it was? And I think I'm up to about a dozen people in that group alone saying that they were practitioners and that they loved how much obvious work went into the research aspect of Agatha All Along, which would be impossible if magic didn't have a fucking definition. Moving on. I'm sorry that every fiber of my being got angry with this person for a second.
So you're on magic. The magic and straight up and down Avengers vs. Bad Guy of the Week stories needs rules in the same way that Superman needs kryptonite, Magneto needs a helmet that makes him immune to Professor X's psychic control, and vampires need to be averse to holy symbols. Not every vampire, actually.
Please, I already did mine. Do yours. It's fine.
Well, no, it's just like I'm for a lot of projects. I do a lot of research, and there's one that Dawn and I are working on currently. I'm not going to name it or anything.
Mhm.
But it's required us to do research on like a lot of types of vampires, which, funnily enough, there are or vampire adjacent like things.
Yeah.
Again, it always strikes me as interesting in how many like different cultures have so many similar like ideas or concepts or
Yeah. They seem to have come up with on their own, pretty much,
yeah. But
or in isolation, I guess is a better way of putting it.
yeah, some vampires. To be fair, it's mostly been the European vampires that have been said to be averse to holy symbols. Obviously, specifically like those of like Christianity or Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah, because somebody had to convert the pre-existing polytheistic cultures to the new religion, and so they had to reframe and recontextualize certain weaknesses that vampires already were thought to have,
Although
so that we can go, my religion is the best religion, derp.
okay, it does make me question what did they do before Christianity in terms of holy symbols?
There have been holy symbols for as long as there have
I,
been
I
various different
know,
religions.
I know, but I mean regarding specifically the Abrahamic faith, because the cross technically wasn't one until after Jesus.
For the longest time, actually, it seemed like the fish rather than the cross was going to be the symbol of Christianity. That didn't start to change until Catholicism kind of solidified its
I mean,
hold on the Roman Empire, or the latter Roman Empire, I guess I should say.
would the Star of David work?
I mean, I doubt you would have seen a Christian doing that, because there was a lot of we need to distance ourselves from the Jews.
No, I mean, okay,
in
obviously,
early Christianity.
again, I am referencing like before Christianity really became a thing, still within the Abrahamic faiths, though.
Yes, actually, although there are also individual formulas for keeping away individual vampiric entities. Like,
I
for
mean, to be fair,
example,
under my, this,
almost everybody at this point knows about Lilith, the cradle-robbing demon of Jewish mythology. There were actual amulets and shit concocted specifically to hang over
yeah,
your child's crib.
for
So that
three, it's actually supposed to be reference to the three angels that slayed all of Lilith's children.
in the alphabet of Ben Zera, yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, this is more of a educated guess on related to holy symbols repelling vampires.
Mhm.
It more so has to do with like you actually having faith imbued into the holy symbol itself.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of pop culture IPs and stuff use that. I don't mind that, actually, as a thing. Dresden Files does that as well, with the whole it just has to be a symbol of what you have faith in. Like, for example, Harry, being a magical practitioner in the Dresden Files, his holy symbol is the pentagram, because it represents the five fundamental elements bound in a circle of human will, and that's what he has faith in. So he's able to use that against the Red Court vampires. In Dresden Files, there are 4 different kinds of vampire that we're aware of. There's the Red Court, which are these H.R. Geiger bat-looking things that wear a human flesh mask to look human, and they're supposedly related to the Mesoamerican deities somehow. There's the Black Court vampires, which are from Eastern Europe, and they're the They're the stereotypical Bram Stoker Dracula ones, and then there's the white court vampires, which are basically incubi and succubi, and what hurts them is actually love, because they feed on lust, or I should say most of them feed on lust. There are others that feed on despair or fear, but most of the white court vampires feed on lust, and so anything that is a true artifact of true love hurts them. I keep telling you, the Dresden Files is a really awesome series.
To be fair, where I got the whole faith thing was from what was it? I don't know if it was 2009 or 2011 Fright Night remake with David Tennant.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, I know that one, the remake. That remake was actually really good. I love both of them, honestly. They're both really good, actually.
I remember watching the remake. I have not seen the first one. I've heard good things about it, obviously. But the vampire actually makes mention that when someone makes like a makeshift cross out of like a couple of sticks, for it to actually work, you have to have faith in it.
Yeah, you have to believe that it's actually a meaningful like artifact of faith.
Yeah. So again, that's just how I always. To me, that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Either that or like, I mean, if you want, I don't know about I haven't seen the new Salem's Lot movie. I haven't heard conflicting things about it.
I haven't seen it either yet. I'm working on it. Most of my Halloween viewer time was spent watching Agatha All Along, because Agatha All Along is a really freaking great series.
But like Hallowed Ground, I think overall, I don't think you need like faith for that. Like if it's consecrated.
Well, I mean, presumably the consecration itself was an act of faith. So
yeah, no, but I think you can stand on it. But vampires are like any type of malevolent entity. Couldn't.
I mean, I'm of two minds on the vampire repellent like faith question, because on the one hand I like it because it allows for other artifacts, not just like crosses and stereotypical Christian imagery and shit. On the other hand, my understanding of what makes an icon powerful is more about channeling energy from a non-human source. So like you could get the same results by calling forth the power of an angel or the power of a polytheistic deity, and so on and so on.
No, yeah,
in my understanding, it would be the power you're channeling through the object that's the important part.
I
Whether
feel
that
like
part comes from your will, as in I put faith in this, I sanctify it, or whether it's from like the power of whatever deity or entity you're channeling coursing through you and then into it.
I do feel like it can be both.
Yeah, it's one of those long-running jokes of why not both?
Yeah.
If both are acceptable, why not both? Yeah.
Although again, in our case, given that we're incorporating every type of vampire, I think obviously specific symbols related to those vampires, like regions, make the most sense.
It also depends on whether those particular vampires are said to have a weakness to faith or not.
I think we did decide that there is like an overall system of weaknesses.
Right. I don't remember whether we decided to sort of add any specific ones on top of things.
Okay.
Or
discussion for another time. We went on such a tangent there.
Yeah. Back on point.
The genie can't magically make Jasmine want to marry Aladdin, because then the story would be over. He literally has a. Okay. When Jafar falls into the trap of wishing to become a genie, it's only satisfying because we've already been told that genies are trapped.
I mean, in theory, I guess I guess Genie got away with that because Jafar didn't specify, but in theory, there's no reason he couldn't have wished to have been a freed genie if he had been smart enough to see that ahead of time. But then again, if he had seen it ahead of time, that would have resulted in there needing to be another solution to the thing. But as a general rule, genie come from the Islamic concept of the jinn, and not every jinn is bound. I get why they did it for the sake of ironic punishment of, the wishes coming back to bite you in the ass as per the usual like genie rules, but if we were going based on a more accurate to the folklore we're dealing with here, there's no reason that Jafar should have needed to become a bound genie. Although, frankly, if Genie had more conscious control of how wishes panned out, I could see him sneaking that in anyway. Anyway, moving on. Again, before we get sidetracked into a sidebar again.
In adventure fiction, the rules of magic give the audience a sense of narrative tension, even when characters have the power to do literally anything. Marvel's Nikhil Minoru can cast any magic spell she wants, but she can never use the same command phrase twice. DC's Billy Batson can transform into a superhero, but only if he's able to say the word Shazam aloud. Even comic book users like... Also, okay, sorry. Little tangent there regarding Shazam. How is it that... Because, to be fair, this is more of a comic thing. Since they can't use Captain Marvel anymore, which is bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he calls himself Shazam.
Yeah, how in the fuck does that not trigger the safe word, so to speak?
I mean, I had the theory that it has to be also with intent.
I mean, sure, but that would mean that you can never accidentally catch, for example, Black Adam by just making him say. This is the thing. In some comics, they actually rely on the fact that someone empowered by those powers has to change back if they say the wrong word, because that's supposed to be the... Like in the Captain Marvel episode, Batman the Brave and the Bold, Dr. Sivana gets the Shazam powers for a second, and Batman tricks him by intentionally mispronouncing Shazam's name that will result in Dr. Sivana correcting him and therefore saying it correctly, and therefore, oops.
Yeah. So,
but honestly, this is a bit of a category error, personally, because like there are characters who are magic users, and then there are characters who have magic powers. I think Shazam and Thor fall more under the characters who are not magic users, but whose powers come from a magical source category.
yeah.
They are characters with magic powers, but they are not magic users.
Yeah, he could just be called the Captain.
Or the champion, because that's what Shazam originally called him in the Fawcett comics, was "You are my champion." So, which this goes back into why it was a stupid idea to change the character's name in the first place, because Shazam is supposed to be the wizard that gives him the powers.
Funny enough, sorry.
And if Billy or whoever else has the powers is capable of using the same powers as the wizard who gave him those powers, why doesn't Billy ever learn to become an actual magic user instead of just someone with magic powers?
Funny enough, there was a concept I had worked on just because I was bored.
Mm-hmm.
Of like an alternate future DC universe.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this to you a long time ago, but the idea was that Billy with the powers of Shazam, also wielded the Helm of Fate, combining those two powers together to become a hero, known as the Champion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all I had. I never really followed through on that.
I am surprised they never tried that, because if I remember correctly, after the events of Day of Vengeance and Nabu and Kent's death, it is Captain Marvel, who at that point was still being called Captain Marvel, who throws the helmet into space so that the Lords of Order can select the next servant of the Lords of Order. The problem being, the Lords of Order have ever since that moment sucked at picking replacements, but that's a whole nother reason why I would, if I had my druthers, I would do for the Dr. Fate mythos what Neil Gaiman did for the Sandman mythos and fix them so that we can tie in some of the stupider decisions that they made.
Out of curiosity, who is a DC character do you think is worthy to wield the Helm of Fate?
Well, see, this is the problem of it's a problem with the possession retcon itself, because
Okay, minus the possession retcon.
okay,
Could just
but I was getting back into the thing.
okay.
The problem you have set up with regards to the helm after Kent and Abu die is, okay, one, even while the possession retcon is in place, it's supposed to be Nabu possessing them, and he died in Day of Vengeance. So that's one thing that needs to be retconned. But two, any magic user worthy enough to become a vessel or to become the next Dr. Fate would have to lose their own identity as per the possession retcon. And they kind of dealt with this in a semi-smart way with regards to Young Justice. Granted, they doubled down on the possession retcon in the first place, which I don't like. But if you've decided the possession retcon needs to be a thing in the first place, which is stupid, they did it in probably the least stupid way they could, which is have Zatara sacrifice himself and become the next Dr. Fate. So that way you can have a character who has the magical skills that we know someone who's Dr. Fate needs, and also it also be a character that we don't have to regret putting on the helm. Like, for example, if John Constantine put on the helm, anyone who wants a Constantine or Hellblazer solo book is going to be mad, because that means that as long as John is Dr. Fate, he can no longer be himself, and so on. Now, I would resolve this by returning Dr. Fate to the way he worked originally in the Golden Age, which is not that Nabu possesses the wearer of the helm, but that he acts as a magical advisor for the wearer of the helm, similar to the way that Firestorm works, but obviously swap science-based nuclear powers for magical powers.
Right.
That's how I would prefer Dr. Fate be written. That Dr. Fate is neither the wearer of the helm nor the spirit of the helm, but is, in some crucial sense, the combination of the two. Anyway, that's a whole ass tangent unto itself. We should move on.
Right. Even comic book magic users like John Constantine or Doctor Strange, whose powers are not at all specifically enumerated, still have rules that give them the characteristic tone and tension of a John Constantine or Doctor Strange story. All magic has a cost.
Okay, here's the thing with that. Because you were so stupid in the paragraph previous to this one, you missed probably the single most crucial aspect of why comic book magic usually works, which is, while it is overpowered for the sake of fiction or for the sake of the plot, comic book magic is very good at actually being accurate to IRL occultism, due in no small part to the fact that people who knew or practice certain aspects of IRL occultism are frequently also writers of characters who are magic users. be it Alan Moore giving us Constantine, be it Steve Ditko, who fiddled around with Buddhism from time to time while still being a Randian objectivist, or be it Gardner Fox, who was a massive Lovecraft fanboy and came up with the concept of what if there was a good Lovecraftian entity to fight the destructive ones, and therefore Dr. Fate was created as a result. But the point is, one of the crucial aspects of urban fantasy in general, or comic book magic in particular, is not just that it defines rules for magic, but that those rules are very frequently informed by actual IRL practices of magic, which, by the way, was also one of the benefits of that, or rather that Agatha all along made use of. And the writers as much as said that they actually did homework on actual witchcraft so that they could use that to inform the show. And it's one of the reasons why the show is so well written, is because they actually did their homework. But you can't play that card now because you spent the previous paragraph making a complete ass of yourself and saying it's magic, we don't have to explain it, / it's magic so it has no definition bullshit. Moving on.
So what does Agatha all along think a witch is? Just because Agatha hasn't said what witches are doesn't mean it's not showing us. In Agatha, as we've seen, witches tell fortunes, work the earth, and peddle dubious remedies. They craft illusions and have familiars. They have creepy things in their basements and wear spooky clothing, unless they're wearing no clothes at all in front of their neighbors, which they don't feel bad about. They do, witchy stuff. But they don't consort with devils. This is Disney Plus after all. And yet Agatha all along hasn't said a single specific thing about what witches are in a setting where 15 miraculous things happen every month.
If you wanted this answer, you could have either read in the comics, which would have led you to the distinction I gave earlier, where witchcraft and shamanism are when you draw power from the ambient magical or spiritual abilities of nature itself, and sorcery, as per the Marvel Universe, is when you draw power from higher or lower planes of existence and or the entities native to said planes of existence. Or you could have looked at it from a IRL perspective, which seems to be where most of Agatha carries its info from, which would have led you to a definition not all that dissimilar from mine, which is magic is the extraphysical or paraphysical manipulation of life energy, either directly or by consorting with beings that are made of it, i.e. spirits, / gods, / demons, / angels, / whatever. But again, you opened your argument by saying magic doesn't have a definition, which is wrong, and therefore you have missed both the Marvel canon explanation for how this works and the IRL explanation for how this works, which leaves you confused because Agatha all along seems to be pulling at least in equal measure from both definitions, the comic one and the IRL one. Which is why it's so fucking well written, magically speaking, and why it is probably the best use of magic we've seen in the entire MCU so far. Next.
Where shapeshifters can be aliens and talking animals can be science experiments, Teen seems to think that getting better at witchcraft allows one to blast energy out of their hands, conjure shields, and levitate. But come on, Teen. You just described Iron Man. He did that in a cave with a box of scraps. Oh my god.
The level of deliberate ignorance here is annoying me. Okay, and again,
it came out before most of Agatha did, so
I'm not going to hold against you things that wouldn't have been available to you at the time, but you literally just referenced a line from episode 2, so I know you've at least seen episode 2. If you recall that scene, Teen explicitly said that what he is lacking is power. He explicitly says, I've done research, sure, but power is what I'm missing. I want to blast, to shield, to levitate, etc. The implication there is plainly obvious for anyone who's not engaged in the current practice of deliberate ignorance, which is knowledge is not enough, but neither is power, because if you remember WandaVision, you remember Agatha chastising Wanda in episode 9 because while she has a natural affinity that gives her lots of power, she has next to no knowledge of how to use it, which is why Agatha, in episode 8 of WandaVision, was confused how someone who can do, as she put it, magic on autopilot, didn't understand, again, using her own words, the fundamentals, which she then went through and explained to us. Again, prior to Agatha All Along, episode 8 of WandaVision did probably the most to set up what magic can and cannot do. There was mind control, Henio Imperium Aninhi. There was transmutation or reformation, Rifimetor Figora. There was protection spells, which we never got an incantation for, because Agatha had already circumscribed them, and there was at least some version of energy construct projection and or memory retrieval because of Agatha's I frequently refer to it as her playing Ghost of Christmas Past with Wanda using her memory spell, which was Mimete in Memoria. But yeah, we got at least a look at the fundamentals in episode 8 of WandaVision that Agatha All Along went on to expand by demarcating the difference between knowledge and power. In other words, the difference between what Teen called analog magic and the sparkly bit that everyone thinks of when they think of magic. And the fact that you somehow can't tell the difference between a magical blast of energy and Iron Man's pulsars frankly disturbs me. Like, Doctor Strange didn't do a very good job of explaining it either, but at the very least, the rundown we got from the Ancient One expressed, we draw spiritual energy from other dimensions of the multiverse, and we use that energy to construct energy construct and spells.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, even if you're just limited to the Ancient One's explanation, it's still a fucking better explanation than the one that you appear to have, by deliberate ignorance, lied yourself into. But even if you were under the impression of the Thor-style Arthur C. Clarke bullshit still, between the Ancient One's explanation in the first Doctor Strange and Agatha's explanation of the fundamentals in episode 8 of WandaVision, and Teen's explanation of the difference between knowledge and power in episode 2 of WandaVision, which would then be doubled down on using the framing of analog magic in episode 3 of WandaVision, that would explain the difference between labor-intensive manual acts of magic, quote-unquote, and power, which involves channeling energy, spiritual energy, and creating constructs with it, etc. Like, this information is all in front of you, either on Marvel Comics wikis or just paying close enough attention to the MCU. And I agree with you. They needed to do more. They needed to do more back in Doctor Strange to explain what magic is and why it did, but just because they didn't doesn't mean the information isn't there somewhere for you to figure out, which it is. I agree with you that it's kind of lame that it's taken them until Agatha All Along to tell us where skill ends and where power begins, but they are at least doing it, and they did it. and they were really, really good about it, which is why I'm hoping this trend continues and we get more in-depth magic. But at the very least, we did have the Ancient Ones, like, 2-minute explanation in the first Doctor Strange. We did have Agatha's explanation of the fundamentals in episode 8 of WandaVision, and we do have Teen's explanation of knowledge versus power and analog magic in Agatha All Along, which we have now gone into some not inconsiderable detail of because the writers were smart enough to do their homework, both Marvel canon-wise and IRL magically wise. Moving along when he gets back.
I return.
Mhm.
All right.
Continuing on.
Yeah, so until further notice, I'll be watching with the hope that the MCU's Great Witch Vibe series will eventually tell me something about what it thinks witches are. And to be fair, also, I'd follow Patty LaPone to Hell and back. And that's the end of the article there.
I mean, it did. I don't know if this person was smart enough to pay attention, but like I say, I think Agatha All Along might be the best use of magic in the entire MCU. It does annoy me that it took this long, but I'm glad someone finally did their homework, either comics lore-wise or IRL practitioner-wise. That's why I love Agatha All Along so much and why I think it resonated not only with me, but with a lot of other practitioners as well. Because it unironically feels like the kind of representation that the other shows only wish they were doing. Moving along, though.
Alright, give me a sec. It's loading. Again, Dolan sent this.
Mm-hmm.
This is originally from Forbes.com. Agatha All Along has dodged an unexpected culture war showdown, written by Paul Tassi, post October 25th, 2025.
2024, I assume you mean.
Yeah, 2024, sorry.
Yeah, you said 2025, and I was like, wait, what? It has not been a year just yet.
Agatha All Along just had a fantastic episode this week. It's best of the season according to fan scores. One sec.
I think that's referring to episode 7, if I'm remembering dates correctly here. Because episode 1 and 2 were September 20-something. Then episode 3 was like October 1st or thereabouts. Then episode 4 would have been like mid-October. Then episode 5 would have been like the 17th, I want to say. And episode 6 would have been the stupid episode that came out right after that. And then episode 7 would have been like the week before Halloween, because the last 2 episodes came out the day before Halloween, and that's episodes 8 and 9. So I think it's referring to Lydia's divination episode there, which was entitled Death's Hand in Mine.
Yep. Alright, I'm back.
Yep.
Alright, Agatha All Along just had a fantastic episode this week. It's best of the season according to fan scores, but one thing that has fascinated me as someone who has been brain poisoned by viewing everything through the lens of culture wars in 2024 is that Agatha has sidestepped expected pushback entirely?
The answer as to why is very simple. The other projects that have become mired in culture wars, stuff like She-Hulk, stuff like Velma, stuff like the Marvels, stuff like The Acolyte, etc., were all unmitigated and obviously shit. Agatha, however, despite what the Garys from Nerdrotic and Critical Drinkers want to admit, was worlds better than any of the above. Like, even Thorius Unlimited tried to make the Agatha Acolyte comparisons, and I was like, what in the actual fuck? Because unlike the Acolyte or She-Hulk, there was no spite towards the fan base. There was no social justice or intersectional feminist proliferation. There was no deliberately spiteful characters. There was no disregard for internal logic. There was no not knowing who our audience is or actively trying to shit on the ones that we think might show up. None of that. The show knew exactly what it was, exactly what it's for, and was very good at it. It is by far and away the best use of magic we've seen in the entire MCU up until this point. It was obviously trying to be a Halloween show, like something along the lines of Salem from a couple of years ago, or American Horror Story Coven, or I don't even want to put Agatha in the same category as Charmed, because frankly, Charmed is a much worse show than Agatha was, both from a writing perspective and from a magic use perspective. But yeah, it was obviously trying to be a spooky, witchy Halloween show set at exactly the right time to take advantage of spooky season, and it was supposed to be a sort of love letter to witchcraft, not a use of witchcraft to be like overbearingly feminist, which it could have easily done but didn't do. Not its characters aren't insufferable. The comedy didn't fall flat. The reason why Agatha all along managed to avoid a culture war backlash is because the show was good. It in fact was so good that even while people like Critical Drinker and Gary from Neurotic tried to almost make it a new version of Rings of Power or She-Hulk, they couldn't do it. Even though they gave their obligatory negative reviews of it, most of those negative reviews took the form of, here is why we should ignore this show entirely, which is exactly how you know that the show was better than they actually wanted it to be. Because if the show were as bad as The Acolyte, or as bad as She-Hulk, or as bad as Rings of Power, or Velma, they would have gone into lengthy and autistic detail every episode. Because that's what you're supposed to do when a show is actually bad. You're supposed to go into lengthy and autistic detail as to how and why it's bad and how humorously bad it is. You can't do that with Agatha, not because the show was just that boring, quote unquote, even though that was the excuse they gave. You couldn't do that with Agatha because Agatha was actually well written and atmospheric and good with regards to using a lot of practical effects, and good with regards to aesthetics, and good with regards to research, both comic lore wise and like IRL practice wise. So in short, the correct answer to this question of yours is Agatha avoided the culture war backlash by being so good that even the people who thrive off of the culture war backlash couldn't actually foment a backlash for Agatha, because if they drew attention to it, it would become very obvious that they were wrong about the show to begin with. Doesn't matter how much you try to make Agatha the next She-Hulk, or the next Velma, or the next Rings of Power, or the next Acolyte, if it's actually not anywhere near as bad as those things, which it wasn't. lots of effort, lots of time, lots of appropriate consideration as to who their audience was and what they wanted is what made Agatha a good show. And by virtue of it being a good show, even people who wanted to disingenuously play the woke card couldn't play the woke card. In other words, if you want to avoid the culture war backlash, stop spiting your audience and make a good show that's good on its own terms. If you manage that, people won't be pissed at you. Moving on.
Sorry, I was just some ideas just came to mind regarding because I know you were so context of what I mean. Don't always whenever I watch a show that Dawn asks me to watch, I always end up coming up with ideas for something somewhere.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, nothing really came about. Again, maybe it's because I kind of like watched it really quickly and never really had time to really sit down and digest a lot of it,
Mhm.
and that's on me. But now that I'm really ruminating and thinking about the show now, I might have something, and we could discuss that later, Dalton.
Mhm. Anyway, moving on to the next bit.
Sorry, my mic. Okay. On its face, Agatha all along seemed like a show that would absolutely attract that sort of negative attention. A series almost exclusively starring women, and its only male star being prominently gay in a way that the MCU really has not seen, outside one of the Eternals' 37 heroes. Okay.
Okay, but here's the thing. They were female characters, but they weren't spiteful gender studies 101 intersectional feminist characters. And Teen/Billy might have been gay, but there were more dimensions of his personality than just, I am the stock gay one. I'm going to say the same thing to you as I said to people like Critical Drinker and Mahler regarding this. If you make a show that is genuinely good about characters who are gay or female or whatever, that aren't ideologically possessed stock characters, and you tell a good story that is well written and well rounded about them, the end result will be a good show or good story or good movie starring characters who happen to be of that nature. The difference between something like Agatha and something like She-Hulk is She-Hulk was created out of ideologically rigid, intersectional feminist, middle-aged spite. There was no spite in Agatha. There was no girl we hate the fans in Agatha. There was no witchcraft is just a metaphor for feminism in Agatha. The show made sense and was good on its own terms, and thus the fact that its characters were female and or gay was not a major breaking point because there was no overbearing ideological obsession with those things. She-Hulk did it the exact opposite way. From minute one, She-Hulk the show was spiteful towards She-Hulk the original character. It was spiteful towards the fans of that IP to begin with. It was spiteful against the television audience of Marvel. It was spiteful against critics that it presumed it would have, and thus fell victim to a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay,
Everything about She-Hulk was nothing but incompetent spite. There was no broader sense of reasoning with regards to the world building of She-Hulk, but there was with Agatha, because for better or worse, Jack Schaefer respected the lore of the witches or supernatural or mystical side of Marvel, and she wanted to please fans thereof. That's why I say, in addition to its many other good qualities, one of the best things I liked about Agatha was it almost felt like an apology letter for the mistakes made in WandaVision.
So, sorry, I was just...
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to do I had a She-Hulk rewrite. I'm just doing some revisioning of it so I can post it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But for one thing, I take a lot of general ideas I had for it. For one thing, making Titania a more involved character, because for one thing, in the comics, she's a really interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
2, she did nothing in that show.
Yeah.
And I recast her.
She was literally a gag character.
Yeah, and I recasted her. No offense to the actress, because I've seen her in other stuff and she's a great actress. But for the Titania I was writing, which was more in line with comics, I decided to go with a different actress to get an actress I know for a fact can play that kind of character that I want from Titania.
But focusing back on Agatha, that too is a major difference between Agatha and She-Hulk. She-Hulk trivialized every single character and made them as annoying to the audience as possible, even its own main character. Agatha focused on giving its characters as much depth and complexity as they could, up to and including its title character. This is the difference. When you make characters who are people first and or operating by in-universe logic first and foremost, and thematic elements second or tertiarily, that encourages investment in those characters more. When you take characters and warp them out of joint to make them an ideological chessboard, that is when that kind of writing becomes insufferable. This is the difference between She-Hulk and Agatha. Agatha was interested in telling a witchy Halloween show about witches, first and foremost, and any feminism or ideological preconceptions were well and truly in the background insofar as they existed at all. The story was about the characters operating within the universe they were operating in and taking it relatively seriously. The craft of directing and writing was on display. The characters had depth, and the characters stood out as individual characters with their own individual personalities and individual self-contained reasons for doing what they were doing. That cannot be said of She-Hulk. It cannot be said of Acolyte. It sure as shit cannot be said of Velma. This is the difference. One of these is a show standing on its own 2 feet because the people behind it actually gave a damn about it. And one of these is using a pop culture IP as a ideological, moral, and political weapon first and foremost, and not even giving a shit about in-universe logic secondarily. That's the difference. Agatha couldn't be made into the next woke demonizing show because it was not woke and didn't demonize either its characters or its audience members. Someone somewhere gave a fuck about Agatha in a way that honestly people gave almost inverse fucks about She-Hulk, because the writers themselves admitted that they had no background or capability to write a legal show, be it a comedy or a drama, and they didn't like the bubbly, effervescent model pinup girl that She-Hulk was in the comics, so they rewrote her to be a bitter, middle-aged Gender Studies 101 graduate.
All right.
And surprise fucking surprise, that resulted in She-Hulk being an absolute omnishambles, while Agatha All Along was a really, really cool witch show taking place at the exact right moment for a witch show to be in. That actually did care about its characters, its world, and actually pleasing the people who were the show's audience. Not to mention, doing a not inconsiderable amount of research into both the comics and the subject matter they were referring to. So they weren't just pulling magical sounding technobabble out their ass. Moving on.
That star would be Wiccan, a gay character from Marvel Comics, but as it turns out, hey, Agatha is queer too. I would say bi. With a past relationship with a woman who is, spoilers, death, but still a woman. Okay, death.
I mean, whether she was a woman the entire time they were together is an open question, considering that Jack Schaefer and some of the other writers did confirm that she was the father of Nicholas Scratch, who was Agatha's child. So whether she took the form of a woman the entire time they were together is an open question. Not that a, powerful metaphysical cosmic entity can't take whatever form she wants, I suspect, but point being, someone had to be the pitcher so as to create the baby in the first place, one assumes. Unless it was literally created from, cosmic magic to begin with, which, to be fair, is not out of the question. But again, instead of making Billy or Agatha the avatar of the politically gay identity or critical queer theory full stop, they made them individual characters with individual motives, in whom being gay was only a surface level or tertiary aspect of who they are as people. And they allowed them, also, speaking of things that other shows don't do, that this show did correctly, they allowed them to be shown as competent. Not just everyone in the show telling everyone they're competent, but by actually demonstrating a level of competency. And none of the characters, by the way, were displayed to be Mary Sue's or Gary Stu's. Some of them had more power than others, sure, but at no point did things warp out of joint because the plot says so. At no point did characters just snap their fingers and make whatever they wanted to be the case be the case. This isn't true of characters like the Jennifer Walters we saw in She-Hulk or the twins from The Acolyte. They were, at every interval, characters who could do whatever they wanted because the plot says so, and because the people in universe were basically cardboard cutouts used to prop up these characters. The characters in Agatha All Along stood on their own by themselves as three-dimensional characters, and that's why Agatha All Along is better than She-Hulk, better than The Acolyte, better than Velma, better than Rings of Power, etc., nauseam. And it's also why, even though the critical drinkers and maulers and so forth tried to make hating on Agatha All Along a thing, it didn't really take. Because even they had to deliver a negative review by not paying attention, rather than being able to go through in autistic detail and mock the show at every interval. She-Hulk, you could mock at every interval and acknowledge as shit at every interval, because She-Hulk really was that bad. So was The Acolyte, so was Velma, so was Rings of Power. But Agatha was not bad. And the only way you can deliver a negative review of Agatha All Along is by not paying attention. And that's why 90% of all the negative reviews Agatha got came in the form of questions that, had they been paying attention, the people giving those reviews would have known. But they didn't want to pay attention to the show because they already had a pre-established dislike for the show, and as a result, the obvious answers to their obvious questions flew right the fuck over their heads. This is different from the approach taken with things like She-Hulk, The Acolyte, Velma, and so on, because in that case, every decision made by a show like She-Hulk or The Acolyte was the wrong way to go about what they were trying to do, or that the thing they were trying to do was simply not something someone should have tried to do to begin with. This is not true of Agatha because someone actually put a bunch of effort into Agatha, and so a lot of the obvious questions had obvious answers to anyone who was in any way predisposed to actually want to pay attention for more than 5 seconds. You can autistically burn She-Hulk to the ground because She-Hulk is that bad at every level. You can't do it with Agatha because Agatha is not bad on anything but the most surface level of I don't want to pay attention to this for some reason. But if you don't have that preconception, you will come away from Agatha probably enjoying Agatha because it was a Halloween show at the exact moment that a Halloween show should have been shown. Duh. Moving on.
Joe simply has not seen any wide-scale pushback in the way we've seen with other Marvel and more recently Star Wars projects in particular. Disney's The Acolyte, for instance, created arguably the biggest firestorm in that universe's history, short of The Last Jedi. Review bombing an entire industry built up around making hyperbolic YouTube videos about it, and racist harassment directed especially at its lead, Amandla Stenberg.
Okay, the reason why people were capable of doing that with The Acolyte, but not with Agatha, is again, because The Acolyte actually was bad, though. It is actually as bad, and warrants just as much hyperbole as it got. Because it was bad on every writing level, on every world-building level, on every aesthetic level. Everything about The Acolyte was a farce. And a comedy of errors of a farce. Agatha, though, was not bad. Its characters were individuals who were well-rounded and well-motivated, and the writing was good, and the questions that the audience honestly had for the show were meaningfully answered by the dialogue and by the world building. The aesthetics were good. The fact that it mostly relied on practical effects was good, etc., ad nauseum. Its timing was also good, because you're targeting a witchy show at the time period, which is spooky season, etc., and so on. The comedy was well timed and well written, and the actors who acted in it were capable of acting well off of each other, etc., ad nauseum. The show did research as and where it needed to. None of this can be said of The Acolyte, or Velma, or She-Hulk, or Rings of Power. It can be said with Agatha, because Agatha is, whether you want to pay attention to it or want to see it as your kind of show or not, actual effort was put into it at every level. That is not true of She-Hulk. In fact, in many cases, shows like She-Hulk and Velma and the Rings of Power were actively spiteful towards anyone who wanted meaningful answers to any of the obvious questions that arose because of it. That's why, for example, Little Platoon, who is, in my opinion, probably the best anti-SJW content creator, except for, us, because obviously shameless self-promotion. But Little Platoon is probably the best anti-SJW content creator because he doesn't ever skip on explanations, or he doesn't ever just raise questions as though those questions are enough to condemn a show or a movie by themselves. He goes into frankly autistic detail on every fucking scene when something is bad. And that's why his reviews are, in my opinion, the most good faith of all the reviews. on the sort of anti-SJW black-pilled side of things. That's why I go to Little Platoon more than I go to almost anyone else other than myself, because I know that whether he wants to or not, Little Platoon is going to pay attention. And even if I disagree with him, or I can think of explanations that he doesn't come up with, I can acknowledge that his criticisms come in good faith. I can't do that, for example, when I watch Gary from Nerdrotic's review of Multiverse of Madness, because several of his criticisms took the form of questions that would have been obvious had he been paying attention. But Little Platoon didn't make an Agatha All Along breakdown series, probably because if he had tried to make a critical review of Agatha All Along in his usual long-form content format, Little Platoon probably would have realized that actual effort and actual time and actual, quality was put into the making of Agatha. That's why I almost wish somebody would request Little Platoon do a takedown of Agatha, because I want to explain to certain people how Agatha was good, but most people don't believe me because they say I'm biased in favor of the show, which, okay, fine, arguable. Let's have Little Platoon do his usual hour plus long breakdowns of Agatha. Let's let him do his usual hour plus long breakdowns, but do it for Agatha, and we'll see if he comes to the same conclusion I did, which is Agatha does not contain most of the negative or spiteful qualities that shows like She-Hulk, The Acolyte, Velma, and Rings of Power do, and it's much more well-rounded, well-written, well-realized, and well-acted than any of the aforementioned as well. Because I'm willing to bet that even if Little Platoon doesn't come away from Agatha liking it, he will at least acknowledge that it is probably the best show on Disney Plus, with regards to the MCU anyway. And frankly, I think it's not entirely impossible that Little Platoon comes away from it disagreeing with his fellow Black Pillars and realizing that the show was good all along. At which point I will high-five him and welcome him to the party, because I'm an anti-SJW too. I've shit on shows like She-Hulk, I've shit on shows like The Acolyte, I've shit on shows like Velma and Rings of Power at length, multiple times. But I did not shit on Agatha, because the negative qualities had by things like She-Hulk, The Acolyte, Velma, Rings of Power, etc., are not in Agatha. And in place of a lot of those negative qualities that are almost universal for woke shows, Agatha has a lot of good qualities that do it a service rather than a disservice. Moving on.
This is not to say there are zero incidents of anti-woke criticism here, but the numbers are not reflecting anything we've seen with The Acolyte, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, or others like them. They all suck. Agatha All Along has a solid 81% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. In fact, critics may be the harsh ones here, as even with an 83%, that's on the lower end of almost all MCU series that have aired. On IMDb, entirely fan voted, it has a 7 out of 10, which is good in context. The last episode had a stellar 9.2 out of 10. You can search YouTube for Agatha All Along videos, and there's not just the rage bait content you've seen from other woke series on the whole.
Okay, and again, the reason Agatha is doing so well among its fan base is because unlike She-Hulk, unlike The Acolyte, unlike Rings of Power, unlike Velma, it does not have active contempt and spite not only for its original IP, but also for its audience. That is a major and substantive difference between the two. That's why most of the anti-woke criticism has not taken. Because people like me, who are normally as anti-woke as you like, can look at Agatha and say it is not bad. It is in fact very good, because it doesn't spite its own world building, it doesn't spite its fan base, it doesn't spite its audience, it doesn't break its own rules or set up things that are never paid off or pay off things that were never set up, etc. It doesn't make the writing 101 mistakes that shows like She-Hulk, The Acolyte, Rings of Power, Velma, etc. have. Those shows actively do hate their audience. They actively do have spite not just for their IP, but anyone who likes those original IP. Those shows do set up things that are never paid off and pay off things that were absolutely never set up or came right the fuck out of nowhere. These things are not true of Agatha. It wanted to please its audience. It did the homework both comic book wise and IRL practitioner wise to show that it did a good faith effort to please its audience. It also targeted its content at an actual audience, namely people who were in the latter part of September throughout all of October looking for something witchy, spooky, and spoopy to watch, which it had. Shows like She-Hulk, The Acolyte, and Velma don't just hate their audience, but insofar as they have any idea who their audience is, they spite them. And insofar as they don't have any idea who their audience is, they basically just throw random shit at the wall and see what sticks. Agatha All Along didn't do that. In fact, in many ways, Agatha All Along was a quite substantial improvement on WandaVision, which for those of us that didn't particularly like the way WandaVision ended was desperately needed, because much of the criticism of WandaVision was Jack Schaefer had no idea the IP she was working with, and therefore had no way of predicting that the audience was actually invested in the mysteries and stuff that she lampshaded by way of Ralph Bohner. But she did learn, or she appears to have learned, a not inconsiderable amount between the end of WandaVision and the creation of Agatha. She did do her homework, both in terms of Marvel IP and in terms of actual spirituality as it can pertain to witchcraft and stuff. And as a result, a lot of us that felt massively ill-used and butthurt about WandaVision and how it ended viewed Agatha All Along as almost an apology letter for what went wrong with WandaVision. An apology that I am gladly willing to accept, because I really needed Agatha All Along to basically be an apology for WandaVision, because I hated the way WandaVision ended. But you know what? I got the apology I was looking for. It was a bit touch and go there with episode 6. Please never ever mention Ralph Bohner again unless you want to make him one of the fan theories from while WandaVision was airing. But unless you want to retcon him into a meaningful character, please let the man die. Never mention him again, and I'm more than willing to accept Agatha All Along as the apology for WandaVision that it essentially is. But that kind of effort and that kind of nature of being in touch with their audience and what the audience likes and wants is the kind of effort that never went into things like She-Hulk or Velma or Rings of Power. Those shows actively did hate the IP they were working with and hate anyone who liked it. Not to mention hating basic bitch writing 101 shit. Agatha didn't. Agatha is good. Agatha put in a bunch of effort that was noticeable and appreciable. Hence, effort went in and spite was left out. Therefore, Agatha is good in exactly the way that She-Hulk, Rings of Power, Velma, and the Acolyte were not. That's the difference. When you make something good, regardless of how woke or not woke it is, its merits will become visible to the audience that is drawn to it. If you make something out of ideological contempt and or spite for not just an IP, but the people who like that IP, that spite and the absolute failure of writing that results from it will be visible and will be mocked accordingly. So in other words, if you want people to like your show, make something that people will like. And try your damnedest not to have active contempt for the IP you're working with and people who like it. This shouldn't need to be said, but in today's day and age, it very much does need to be said, and that very much is the difference between Agatha and She-Hulk. She-Hulk was bad and built from the ground up by ideological woo-woo and spite. Agatha wanted to please its audience and put in the necessary legwork from both a writing perspective and a research perspective to do so, not to mention the correct timing of timing a witchy Halloween show on and around Halloween. Duh. This also shouldn't need to be said, but we live in a world where it very much does need to be said. Moving on.
So how has this happened? In 2024, how has a geeky Marvel show starring almost all women with two queer leads dodging the culture wars that infect so much discourse? One, the show is One, the show is extremely good. It's just inarguably good, funny, clever, heartfelt, and at this point, I think you could make the case that it might be the best MCU series, or at least up with the most liked ones like Loki or the show that spawned it, WandaVision.
It's worlds better than WandaVision, my friend. It was the apology letter for the bullshit from WandaVision that I never fully expected to get, but that I got anyway. And yes, you're right. The fact that it's good makes a hell of a lot of difference. A difference that is not had by things like She-Hulk, Velma, and so on. It also helps that it doesn't hate or resent its audience for making it have to do that work in the first place, whereas the other shows on the list that I've declined a couple of times here definitely did hate and resent the IP they were working with and hated their audiences for liking them and hated them for making them do any sort of work at all. That does make a hell of a lot of difference. Moving on.
Two, there are no real canon debates here with the Acolyte. There was far more intense fervor about what it did or did not do to canon or the nature of the Jedi and the Force's fundamental issues. Here, there are certainly some altered things, like Death is Agatha's love interest, not Thanos's. But I mean, before this, Agatha was probably the 235th most important character in the MCU, so she works as rising from source material without a ton of baggage attached.
The other factor that you seem to be overlooking there, sir, is both Marvel canonicity-wise and IRL magical practice-wise, the writers did their homework, and they didn't hate or resent having to do so. Or if they did, at least it made it nowhere to the show. Here we had a show that wanted to please its audience, knew exactly who that audience was and exactly how to please them. Not to mention, as Jack Schaefer admitted herself, before she made WandaVision, she had no idea that fan bases were this obsessive about details like this. However, she learned from WandaVision that that was the case, and so in her attempt to redeem herself for people's dislike of WandaVision, did she get actively spiteful towards people who didn't like WandaVision? Fuck no. She learned her lesson and tried to make a show that would please those sorts of fans in retrospect. And that allowed Agatha all along to be the apology for WandaVision that a lot of us always needed but never assumed we would get. That's one of the reasons why it's so fucking good. Moving on.
3. No cast controversies, no explicit messaging. The entire campaign against Captain Marvel and specifically Brie Larson for years after that film was based on comments she made about wanting a more diverse selection of movie critics. She-Hulk, another much-hated series, had explicit feminist messaging all throughout its run. Neither entity was wrong to do this, but Agatha just doesn't have any of it. The cast has been uncontroversial in interviews, and though the show stars women and is specifically queer, those characters just exist without it being a main focus of the series.
You're so close to the correct answer on this one. It was, in fact, wrong for She-Hulk and the Marvels and the Acolyte and Velma and Rings of Power to be as explicit as they were, to be as ideologically narrow as they were, to be as moralistic and abrasive as they were, to be as spiteful and vindictive as they were, and actively spiteful and contemptuous of the IP that they were basing things on, and also the people that liked that original IP. Agatha was successful because it was not spiteful or vindictive or contemptuous or ideological or political or narrow or overbearing or moralistic or shameful or just dismissive of its own audience, its own fan base, and the IP that it was supposedly based on. You are correct to identify this, and I almost gave you an entire point for that until you got to the but neither show was wrong to do that thing. Self-evidently, the results demonstrate, if nothing else, that is in fact wrong. It's wrong to be spiteful. It's wrong to be vindictive. It's wrong to be abrasive. It's wrong to be so pedantically political. It's wrong to have contempt not just for your IP, but for the people who like the original IP as it was. It's wrong to shun and shame your own audience base. It's wrong to make characters deliberately unlikable on purpose so that it pisses off, quote-unquote, the right people. Those things are wrong, and the absence of them is exactly why Agatha worked. It's not about feminism, it's not about womanhood, it was about witches because it was a witch show. And so the only representation that mattered was the representation of both Marvel canon lore, which it did quite well, and also, for what it's worth, the writers and showrunner did their homework vis-a-vis real practices of magic with a K on the end, and witchcraft in broad strokes. And that is why it resonated with people like me. Because even though I am as anti-woke as you like, even though I find intersectional feminism to be fundamentally conceptually in error, even though I hate the neo-Hegelian Frankfurt School postmodern post-structural critical queer theory, etc., even though I hate all those things, I do love seeing my spirituality reflected in an IP that it makes sense to be reflected in. I am a fan of the Marvel Comics, and I am also a 18-year veteran of occultism. I've been a magical practitioner for literally my entire adult life. I'm only 29, and I've been practicing magic for 18 years of those 29. And therefore, it made meritocratic sense. If you're gonna write a witch show, you might want to learn a little bit about what witchcraft is so you don't have to reinvent the wheel or pull some other entirely different conception of it out of your ass. They did that homework, both Marvel Comics lore-wise and actual lore-wise, and the effort and time and love letters that were made for the fans or for other practitioners in that show paid off. It allowed that time and effort and intrigue to be shown to the audience, and the audience was by and large very receptive to it. You see. Moving on.
Number 4, the harassment of Amanda Sternberg in The Acolyte was largely racist.
No, it was not.
Here the
None.
show's leads are white and its actors of color who are supporting characters. There's also no race or gender swapping of existing characters in a way that is often lambasted.
Okay, small asterisks here. Jennifer Kale was white in the comics, but as you say, they didn't make a thing, they didn't make a focus or a inflection point out of her casting. She simply, it appears, was the best actress for the role, and nobody fucking bothered to mention it because it wasn't relevant to her character, or drawing attention to it would have made the character worse. So I will give you about half a point in the sense that there could, in the most technical sense, be a little bit of race swapping, but the correct way to do that is exactly the way that they did it with Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption. Alistair Red Redding, in the short story that The Shawshank Redemption is based on, was an Irishman. But absolutely no one, would ever want Morgan Freeman to be replaced with any Irish actor in Shawshank Redemption. No one. Morgan Freeman got to that role based on being the best person for the role. And it seems to me that the actress who played Jennifer Kale in Agatha All Along also got the job not because she was a black woman, but because she was simply the best person for the role, and they focused on who her character was and is. Do you see how in-universe logic, in-universe characterization, and prioritizing the depth and complexity of the world itself rather than the thematic nonsense? Do you see how that makes quite a lot of difference? And do you see how that is a vast difference between Agatha and shows like She-Hulk? Shows like She-Hulk basically ruined everything about the in-universe logic to make the political grandstanding work. Agatha didn't even attempt to do any political grandstanding, it just made a good show wherein the in-universe logic and out-of-universe research collaborated to make a really well-written, really complex, and really interesting show. That's how you do it. Just make something good where identity genuinely doesn't matter, and people will come, and people will enjoy it. I know, I am one. If this show were as bad as She-Hulk, or Velma, or The Acolyte, or Rings of Power, or Daniel Kibble-Smith's New Warriors, I would be the first person setting it on fire, especially because of how much love I have for magic, not just in my IRL spiritual practices, but also in the comics, as a lover of mystical Marvel Comics IP. If this show had been bad, I would have been the first person to nuke it from orbit. Because I am someone who generally considers himself anti-social justice or anti-woke, despite the fact that I'm gay and physically disabled, by the way. But because the show was good, because the show hyperfixated not on external thematic political bullshit, but just on in-universe logic and characterization and being the best damn witch show it could be, I am one of this show's most fervent defenders. That's why whenever I see someone try to compare it to things like The Acolyte, I can tell they haven't actually meaningfully tried to engage with the subject matter, because if they had, they would know just how good Agatha is in comparison to shows like She-Hulk or The Acolyte. Moving on.
Well, the reason for this is happening, or rather not happening, may be varied. This, the end result is the same, that a woman-led queer starring series is one of the MCU's best in avoiding the intensely divided politics-based firestorms we've seen from so many other similar projects. I hope this trend can continue. Okay, we'll make good shit then.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I hope this trend can continue as well, because obviously, being a gay guy myself, I'm not homophobic. Obviously, being a disabled person myself, I'm not ableist and shit. But nor do I feel represented or reflected by the academic preconceptions of critical queer theory or critical theory in general. Those two things aren't the same thing. You can be gay and have nothing to do with being politically LGBT. You can be disabled and have nothing to do with disability activism. You can be of different racial groups and have nothing to do with critical race theory or any other such neo-Hegelian claptrap. If you want a show to be good, you have to put in the effort and actually give a damn about it on its own merits, as well as the merits of the audience you're trying to please with it. Because no one is benefited by gay characters all being wispy, effeminate stereotypes. No one is benefited when a black character spouts BLM slogans. No one is benefited when whiny, bitter, middle-aged, type A career women take out their rage and their contempt for everyone else around them, either in fiction, in, fictional female characters, or in actuality when, Karens come and do the whole respect feminism thing. If you want these characters to be good representation, instead of hyperfixating on labels of identity and politics and this, that, and the other, actually try to understand the subject matter you're working with, like Agatha All Along did. I felt more represented by Agatha All Along than I have by any other gay character or any other disabled character I've ever dealt with. Everyone who knows me knows my absolute contempt for Tiny Tim syndrome. And how much I get annoyed when every character is basically Big Gay Al from South Park, who is super thanks for asking. Everyone who knows me knows how much I get annoyed when the attempts to be representative, allegedly, of me either actively have contempt for me because I have different politics than they do, or actively make me ashamed of who and what I am. But Agatha All Along didn't bother to represent me as a gay person, or represent me as a disabled person, or represent me as a religious, well, I guess kind of in the religious minority sense. Agatha all along had representation where it mattered. It made me feel represented as a magical practitioner, or a witch if you like. So, instead of hyperfixating on identitarian representation or identitarian politics, why don't you see if you can be representative of anything in a meritocratic standpoint? Tony Stark doesn't work as a representative of all white men. In fact, almost no character works as a representative for all white men. But I can guarantee you, characters like Tony Stark might get somebody into mechanical or electrical engineering.
Look at the hacksmith.
Yeah. Steve Rogers isn't particularly supposed to be representative of all white men, but he gets a lot of people in the mindset of America, fuck yeah. I don't know why you would hyperfixate on the fact that Doctor Strange was a doctor, but certainly a character like House might inspire, Dr. Gregory House might inspire someone to become a medical doctor. I happen to actually know of someone who's anti-woke even, weaponized nerd rage, who likes the Punisher and is also a aficionado of guns and gun culture. And I, as a magical practitioner, feel much more represented by something like Agatha All Along than I ever have or ever will by things like Harry Potter or Charmed. And frankly, Agatha All Along was the best, like, quote-unquote magic representation, if you like, than basically anything else in the MCU so far. Because it actually bothered to take the time and correlate things that were happening in the fictional universe of the story with IRL stuff and well thought out reasoning from a genuine practitioner's perspective. And I'm sure there will be people who are turned on to things like tarot or like herbalism or alchemy or protection magic by a show like Agatha All Along, because it's not only a good basis for a story and a well-rounded, well-researched one at that, and it's not only well founded from a esoteric philosophy standpoint, but it also takes the time to portray magic so well that it makes people want to get into it. And it's been a very long time since I've seen a fantasy IP or horror IP even use magic so well that not only does it make people who are already in it, like me, want to get deeper into it, but also has the potential of converting a bunch of newbies. That's the kind of representation that should matter. Not the parts of someone's identity they can't control, but the parts of someone's identity that actually tell you something meaningful about them, their hobbies, their interests, their skill set, instead of focusing on the kinds of identity that people can't choose or can't control. Focus on the things that define someone's identity based on what their interests, hobbies, and skills are, and
Don,
or identities they would choose to adopt.
Don.
Moving on. Yeah.
All right. So this is the last thing. This is what I found rather on short notice, just so we ended on something rather positive.
Mm-hmm.
This is a trailer for a movie called Werewolves that's coming out December 6th.
Oh God. Yet another case of why put off to December or what would have made sense in October.
Okay, so the description for it is a supermoon event has triggered a latent gene in every human on the planet, turning anyone who entered the moonlight into a werewolf for that one night. Chaos ensued, and close to 1 billion people died. Now, a year later, the supermoon is back.
Oh boy, this should be interesting.
So it's the Purge, but with werewolves.
Wolfsbane then?
I was just gonna go jack-o'-lanterns.
I don't know. Let's go Wolfsbane because it's more on point, I guess.
Wolfsbane. I don't have anything to say yet. Just building up.
Yeah. Wolfsbane.
Mom?
That was actually, I mean, it's out of focus, but you can see they're going like classic werewolf design.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, pretty good.
Mhm.
All right. Wolfsbane?
Wolfsbane.
Uncle Wes, why can't you stay?
They need me to help them try and stop this. We're the only family we have left.
We got this.
Cody! What are you doing, man? You should kill somebody.
We are all soldiers now.
Tonight, when that sun sets, it's gonna be every man for himself.
I mean, there would be people like that, yeah.
And I mean, I know this is a bit of a pedantic quibble, but there's quite a lot of time between sunset and moonrise, so you'd have at least a little while if the moon is what triggers it.
Supermoon, specifically.
Right, but still, like, there's a gap of time between sunset and moonrise to work with here. Again, I realize I'm being a pedantic motherfucker. Such is life.
When are you not?
This is the point, yes.
Yeah.
But Wolfsbane.
I'm getting kind of B horror movie vibes. Is that just me?
No, they're definitely going that route. I don't think you were far off when you said, like, the Wolfman meets the Purge.
All right. Wolfman?
Wolfsbane.
We have a 9-hour window to test and report our findings. We hope to see if this mutation can be blocked.
Let's go over the rules.
Don't open the door for anyone.
Don't hesitate for a second.
Hoorah! 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 Good luck tonight.
I mean, yeah, honestly, if we're looking from in-world perspective, this would be fucking terrifying.
Yeah, that's... Especially if you were one of the ones who wasn't a werewolf, and you knew that, like, your friends and neighbors were basically going to go uncontrollably feral as soon as the moon came up.
Yep. Also, pretty big cast, too.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of them are just there to die, more or less, but still. Like you were saying, I think it's trying to be Wolfman meets the Purge. So.
Well, I dig the B movies tone because, I mean, we don't really get a lot of B movies.
Yeah, B movies get a bad rap. They have a soul, which is something more than I can say for a lot of movies.
All right. Wolfsbane?
Wolfsbane.
Canopy retraction commencing.
I mean, it kind of looked like they're going semi-practical with CGI.
Yeah. This is reminded me of a random vampire movie, and I can't remember the name of it. The one where, like, vampirism is like a virus.
Daybreakers?
I think so.
With Ethan Hawke?
Yeah.
Daybreakers.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't like that movie a lot.
I mean, I don't dislike it. It's just been a long time since I watched it.
Alright. Wolfsbane?
Wolfsbane.
Also, what did people think was going to happen when you open a canopy with werewolves? Did you think the cages you built were actually going to work?
Also, question: if this is a recent event that takes place in the modern world, why are you not making all the things out of silver, all of them?
Well, it said that it was a supermoon that affected people that were in the Moonlight, specific genes. So it's nothing supernatural.
Right, but assuming they do some kind of Twilight-esque technobabble to explain why Silver makes them vulnerable or something, that still doesn't explain why that if I were president or whatever during this period, assuming that I didn't get woofed, I would be like, smelt down all the available silver so we could make it into like cages and cattle prods and shit.
I mean, to be fair, silver, like pure silver in contact with any type of living creature would have adverse effects.
Right. So I assume it's gonna be one of those weird, kind of like what they did with Morbius, where like the sudden avoidance is about like something equivalent to porphyria or something. Like I assume there's something like that, but it's a sulfur allergy or something, which there is actually a thing. You can become allergic to metals.
No, yeah, I've heard about that.
So like I assume they're still gonna find a pseudoscience-y technobabble way of explaining why silver is something they're vulnerable to. Which leads us back to the everything should be made of silver.
Right. Shall we?
With Bane.
What's been?
No more guns, no more guards. Those things are coming for us.
I'm here.
Bite me!
This is like a fun little romp.
Yeah, again, I don't think you were far wrong when you said Wolfman meets the Purge. Although I would obviously throw a little bit of Daybreakers in there too.
Well, I think a majority of the movie is basically Wolfman meets the Purge.
Mm-hmm.
And I want like an alternate series of Purge movies that involve like monsters.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if we're going down this track of thinking here,
Mm-hmm.
what if it's like the week of Samhain or Samhain?
Mm-hmm.
Like December, what was it? Not December. No, October 31st to
November 11th.
November 11th. That's a lot longer than I thought. And like, there's some type of ancient agreement by monsters, or like the supernatural and humanity.
Well, I mean, technically, it should go from mid-October to mid-November, so it should be like October 13th through November 11th, thereabouts.
But my point.
Yeah, but I get where you're going with this. Yeah.
To be fair, there's also like a short film I remember watching that had the guy who played Death in it, like as a cameo. Like Death in Supernatural.
Okay, so yeah, he also played a demon called Esteroth in The Magicians, actually.
But yeah, there was a short film. It actually kind of seemed to be paying respect to like the old traditions of giving what's the word I'm thinking of? Giving
Offerings.
offerings. Why the fuck did that elude me? To some things, less you pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Anyway, shall we?
Wolfbane.
Yeah, it looks like they're doing practical and CGI.
Which is always nice.
Oh yeah. Again, I'm
That
never
was
gonna.
another good thing about Agatha, was so much of the effects were done practically.
Yeah,
There was almost no CGI in it.
All right.
Again, I must ask the question of who recently suffered a blow to the head and put it in December instead of October, but I don't make these decisions.
Yeah, so hopefully, more than likely, next Saturday will be our next. Will just be a regular podcast episode for November.
It will also be right near Brainstormer's birthday, if I'm remembering correctly, because your birthday's the 16th, right?
Yep. I will be 25.
Oh god, that makes me feel old.
Imagine how I feel.
Oh dear. Now I have reminded myself that I will be 30 on my next birthday. Oh, the wailing and gnashing of teeth.
But yeah. Well, I don't think there was really anything that happened in October that wasn't Halloween related.
No, I didn't. There didn't seem to be very much. Pop culture news that wasn't Halloween related, and I assume the news cycle is going to be dominated for a while, based on the recent election. So we will. I already know of a couple articles we might be able to use.
and
Well,
we got some old videos and stuff we need to finish.
we will cross the bridge of next week when we come to it.
Yeah. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avideze, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Don't let anyone tell you Agatha's bad, and fuck off.